Chapter 903. That afternoon, Wuxian got off work on time. His assistant, Xiekuan, saw that there was nothing for him to worry about. He hummed a tune as he walked out of the monitoring building and went straight to a nearby brothel. There was a very good-looking girl who had just arrived. Xiekuan had spent a lot of money to bribe her. He might be able to be the groom tonight. With a face full of pride, Xiekuan saw that the brothel was just around the corner. With a smile on his face, Xiekuan felt his vision turn black, followed by a pain in his neck, and he lost consciousness. When Xiekuan woke up, he was already in a tightly sealed room. The walls were hung with various torture tools. The raging fire was right beside him, and the feeling of being roasted made his body tense up involuntarily. "You're Xiekuan, right?" A shout suddenly sounded in his ear, and a big man with a scar on his face appeared in front of him. He held a whip in his hand and looked at Xiekuan with an inquisitive look, as if to see how much punishment he could endure. "Ah, who are you? Who are you? Do you know who I am?" Seeing this situation, Xiekuan knew that he might have been kidnapped. If it was really the mercenaries who wanted to arrest him, according to the procedure, they would first show their documents. Even as the assistant of Vice Minister Wuxian, he needed to greet the Vice Minister's office. However, they did not do so, which was enough to explain the problem. He became extremely nervous. He did not know why these people were looking for him. If they paid for his life, what should he do? Working in the Ministry of Supervision building, Xiekuan was very clear about the mercenaries' policy towards bandits. They had always killed one as an example to others. In order to destroy evidence and not be discovered, they would often end up killing the hostage. At the thought that he might die, Xiekuan immediately closed his eyes and shouted loudly, "I don't know you, and I didn't see what you looked like. As long as you don't kill me, everything will be fine." Xiekuan suddenly closed his eyes, which made the people around him stunned, especially Beta Persei, who was hiding in the dark, who smiled uninterestedly. This Xiekuan was very perceptive. If that was the case, the next thing would be easy to handle. Things would be a lot easier. After knowing that they weren't here to kill him, and that Xiekuan was only here to beg for his life, he was very cooperative. He gave him whatever he wanted, and answered whatever he was asked. The final result shocked Beta Persei. When he saw the confession and where the silver was stored, he waved his hand at Ba Daojiang, who had a scar on his face. "Second brother, what should we do next?" Ba Daojiang walked towards Beta Persei, who was hiding in the shadows, and chuckled. It was quite fun to be able to take on such a task. The only thing that made him unhappy was that Xiekuan was too cooperative. He hadn't even shown any of his skills yet, and Xiekuan had already flirted with him. "I'll go get the money and report to the young master." Beta Persei patted Ba Daojiang on the shoulder, then took out an ingot of silver from his bosom, and went out for supper with his brothers. "How should we deal with this person? Should we?" Ba Daojiang took the ingot and made a throat-slitting gesture. "We can't kill him. The young master has instructed that this person should be left for Wuxian to deal with. We'll just watch the show." Beta Persei chuckled. Wouldn't it be too easy to kill Xiekuan now? It would be better to leave him behind to verify his sincerity. "Understood." Ba Daojiang chuckled and watched Beta Persei leave. According to Xiekuan's instructions, Beta Persei and his men quickly retrieved the silver. There were a total of 3 big chests containing 15,000 taels of silver. They were carried into the palace and sent to Yang Chendong. "Why is it silver?" Yang Chendong didn't seem surprised by this result, but he was curious that the silver wasn't exchanged for banknotes. After all, these 3 big chests weren't very good for hiding. This is all Xiekuan's idea. He was worried that one day something would happen. Even if he had banknotes in his hands, he wouldn't dare to exchange them for silver. He said it was more convenient this way. Moreover, when he wanted to, he could go take a look and touch it. It would give him a great sense of satisfaction. "Young master, what do you think this is?" Beta Persei chuckled. "Psychopath." Yang Chendong shook his head and said after giving an attribution, "How is it? Did he confess?" "Yes, he confessed everything. He used Vice Minister Wu's name to ask for bribes from many military and political cadres. With the previous company commander and Long Yuntian as examples, many people chose to swallow their anger. In just over half a year, he got so much silver. He also said that he and Vice Minister Wu's concubine would split the silver 50-50. Political Commissar Su Hao took the opportunity to take the high position of regiment commander. It could be said that they each took what they needed. By the way, Wu Qian was just like his name. He really didn't have any money. He also didn't participate in this matter. Xiekuan also confirmed this matter. Beta Persei had just handed the information he received and the confession to Yang Qindong. But he saw that the sixth young master had already stood up angrily and slammed the table. What a clear division of the loot. Tell me, what other high-ranking officials were involved? Disregarding everything else, just the fact that Su Hao was able to become a regimental officer and was in the most elite unit of the Cold Front. It was impossible that no one else had participated in this. As for Wu Qian, he could only prove that he had good integrity and that Luan Xiaoyu didn't misjudge him. However, whether he could be put in an important position or not depended on how he dealt with this matter next. Young master, please calm down. There were other people involved, but they were all the assistants of those high-ranking officials. Many things were done by them. They are the most trusted people of those high-ranking officials. Some things were done by them. Beta Persei said in a low voice while carefully observing Yang Qindong's expression. In a sense, he was also one of Yang Qindong's people. This was equivalent to implicating him. If you don't clean the house, how can you clean the world? They can't even manage the people around them well. They are also responsible. It seems that this self-examination is not thorough enough. Yang Qindong said with emotion. 1,000-mile dike would collapse because of an ant's nest. Whenever something big happened, it would be because of a small matter that wasn't done well. In the end, it would add up to become a big matter. Yang Qindong thought to himself. It seemed that the self-examination wasn't enough. The departments that were supervised were also not complete. This time, he could take advantage of the fact that he was in Crimson City to do a good job. At the same time, he could also set up a plan for it. Yang Qindong slept late that day. On the morning of the second day, when the various departments had just started work, 3 large boxes suddenly appeared at the entrance of the Ministry of Supervision, as well as a large envelope addressed to Vice Minister Wu Qian. No one could explain how this thing came to be, but it appeared in front of everyone in such a grand manner. This matter naturally caused a commotion. When Vice Minister Wu Qian saw this at the entrance of his unit, he immediately ordered his men to open the 3 boxes. Then, a dazzling amount of silver appeared in front of everyone. Wow! There's so much silver. Yeah, I'm afraid there's more than 10,000 silver. What's the meaning of this? Why did they leave so much silver in front of our Ministry of Supervision in the morning? That's right. Could it be that some official is here to surrender? But this is already more than 10,000 silver. I'm afraid that even if he surrenders, the punishment won't be too light. The sounds of discussion came one after another. Although Yang Qindong had set a rule that embezzling 10,000 silver would result in the death penalty, there were exceptions. For example, if there were meritorious deeds or surrenders, it would depend on the person. Everyone was wondering if this was the act of a corrupt official to save his life. Wu Qian was also dazzled by the white silvers. Although the amount of silver was recorded in the investigation of corrupt officials, it was only a number after all. It was not as direct as the silver in front of him. However, Wu Qian was merely shocked. When he saw that there was another letter on the box that was addressed to him, Wu Qian reached out to take it, and then opened it. In an instant, everyone's attention was attracted. Just when everyone's eyes fell on Wu Qian, waiting to see how he would react and guess who wrote this, Vice Minister Wu suddenly lost his balance and fell straight to the ground. Fortunately, someone with sharp eyes and agile hands quickly reached out to support him, so he did not fall. However, at this moment, Wu Qian's face was pale, and his breathing was a little rapid. Everyone was even more surprised to see such a loss of composure. What exactly was written in the letter that made Vice Minister Wu, who was known for being impartial, lose his composure like this? Let's go. At some point, Minister Xinyu appeared and his assistant began to chase people away. Soon, the place became quiet again. Xinyu also took 2 steps forward and came to Wu Qian, asking with concern, Old Wu, are you okay? I'm fine, I have something to report to the minister. Wu Qian's expression slowly returned to normal. Although he was still very shocked and angry, since it had already happened, he had to find a way to solve it. Okay, then let's go to my office to talk. Come, seal these 3 boxes first. Shen Yu nodded and then ordered the people around him. In the minister's office, Wu Qian showed the letter to Shen Yu. It was not accurate to say that it was a letter. It was a confession, and Xie Kuan's name and handprint were written in the confession column. Of course, he was very familiar with the handwriting. He could tell at a glance that it was handwritten. He didn't expect such a big thing to happen to the people around him. At the same time, even his newly married wife and brother-in-law were sinners. This blow came too fast, so fast that Wu Qian wasn't prepared at all, and couldn't react in time. Chapter 904. In comparison, Minister Shen Yu was much calmer. After he read the letter, he sighed. He did not expect that his impartial and hardworking deputy would be involved in such a situation. If it were anyone else, they would be in pain and in a dilemma. Minister, I would like to withdraw. Wu Qian announced his decision. This matter involved his assistant and family. He no longer had the authority to deal with this matter. Withdraw? Shen Yu pondered for a moment and shook his head. Normally, this matter involves your family and the people around you. You should withdraw. But now this matter has been made known to everyone in the Ministry of Supervision. Perhaps the truth will spread soon. If you withdraw now, people will inevitably say that you are trying to escape. Although it is only a difference of 1 word. Sometimes rumors can be fatal. Minister, what should I do? After Wu Qian heard this, he realized that he had underestimated the matter. If it was before, he could withdraw. But if he withdrew now, he was afraid that someone would really use this matter to make an issue out of it. One must know that the Ministry of Supervision looked impressive, but in reality, they had offended many people. Once something happened to them, there would be many people who would kick them when they were down. Investigate it. Investigate it yourself. Then use the results to slap the faces of those who are watching the show. Let them see what kind of person you are, Old Wu. Take this opportunity to show your impartial side. Shen Yu said with an encouraging attitude, but then he changed the topic and said, but if you want to do this, then you must be prepared to sacrifice some people. And if you can't do this, then I agree to withdraw. Wu Qian understood what Shen Yu meant. He was asking him to make a decision. Should he choose the law or should he choose his family? The problem was there. Presumably, it was a very difficult choice for anyone. It was even a difficult decision to make. Wu Qian didn't say anything. Shen Yu took out a box of Heavenly Con cigarettes from his pocket. He took out a stick and put it in his mouth. Then he took out another stick and handed it to Wu Qian. After lighting it up, he took a puff and said, I know that anyone in your position would be very difficult. But since we're in this position, we have to make our own personal contributions. Our bodies aren't good enough, so we can't go into battle and kill enemies like Leng Feng. But the 6th young master once said that there's no distinction between a position and a job. It's all about making contributions. Think about it. Because of our hard work, many people are now living a life that was unimaginable in the past. Didn't you choose to work here and contribute because you couldn't stand the corruption of the great Ming dynasty? So every time I encounter something that I can't decide, I will think about what my original intention was. Sometimes, I even feel very grateful to the 6th young master. If he didn't send people to bring me here, I wouldn't have known that there was such a world outside the great Ming dynasty. The Han people can live so well, have such self-respect, and be respected by others. To be honest, I like this place. Even when I'm old, I won't regret what I've done because this is the life I want and the life I want to see. Director, don't say anymore. When has my original intention ever changed? Don't worry, I'll personally deal with this matter. I'll also let others see what kind of person I, Wu Qian, am. Wu Qian suddenly stood up. His eyes flashed with determination. Yes, he was once an official of the great Ming dynasty. He belonged to the type that wasn't favored. Later on, when the great Ming dynasty split into the north and south, he became an official of the southern Ming dynasty. He was a county magistrate in Yunnan, a place that people called the Savage Land. King Minzhuang and the others suddenly rebelled, and the county couldn't be defended. He followed the people out of the city and went straight to Guangdong. Along the way, he had clearly seen the corrupt officials of the southern Ming Empire. Those officials ate and drank well every day. Then, they turned around and watched the people starve to death because they didn't have anything to eat. From that time on, Wu Qian completely lost confidence in Baiming's officials. Until the start of the money-buying activities, he hid his identity and came to Qixian City. It was also at that time that his wife died of starvation. His current wife was remarried not long ago. She couldn't be considered a main wife, but a concubine. Speaking of which, when Wu Qian first came to Qixian City, he was shocked by everything here. At that time he didn't have the authority or qualifications to come to Qixian City. He could only live in a small place in the countryside. But even so, he was given enough land to support him. Moreover, the tax was meager. It followed the grain production, and there was no pressure at all. It could be said that as long as people weren't lazy, they could live a rich life. However, as a former county magistrate, he was more curious. If the countryside was like this, then what would the city be like? It was also at that time that Wu Qian worked hard and performed well. In the end, he relied on his own strength to complete the process of coming from the countryside to Qixian City. Then he saw a different world. It was a place that he didn't even dare to think about in reality, but it was his dream. Then, with his hard work, he climbed up step by step until he received the attention of the future 6th Madam Wan Xiaoyu. Finally, he became the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Supervision. Thinking back to the past, if this matter was in the past, perhaps he wouldn't have hesitated too much. But now he was actually requesting to withdraw. Since he felt troubled, did this mean that his original intentions had changed? After a conversation with Shenyu, Wu Qian pulled himself together, and then walked out of the minister's office. A series of orders were sent out from his mouth. First, Xie Kuan, who was sick at home and didn't go to work, was arrested at home. He thought that this time he could spend money to avoid the disaster. However, when the door was broken open and a squad of law enforcement officers from the Ministry of Supervision appeared in front of him, he felt his vision go dark. He knew that this time, it was over. Then, Political Commissar Su Hao was arrested in the military camp. Originally, he wanted to use his identity as a political commissar to resist. However, when he saw that the person accompanying him was actually Commander Gao Xiong, he knew that resisting was courting death. Finally, Wu Chunshur was arrested. Compared to the two men, she wasn't that panicked. Perhaps she knew that this day would come, or perhaps she thought that she would be fine because she was Wu Qian's concubine. The three main personnel were arrested swiftly and decisively. Then, some staff members from the Ministry of Supervision and other departments were arrested. They were usually the people around the top leaders. Usually, anyone who saw them would laugh at them. However, this time, they were all blocked in the office by the law enforcement officers of the Ministry of Supervision. Every time a leader wanted to stand up and speak, the law enforcement officers would say that they had something to discuss with Wu Qian. With just this one sentence, all the leaders shut their mouths and did not say anything. The Ministry of Supervision was an existence that everyone wanted to avoid. Who would take the initiative to approach them? Beta Persei arranged for people to keep an eye on Xie Kuan, and the other wanted criminals in the morning. He was afraid that these people would escape. When he saw the law enforcement officers of the Ministry of Supervision appear, and they were ordered to come by Vice Minister Wu Qian, he knew that his task was completed. The next step was to see how the verdict would be. In the palace, Yang Chendong was accompanying the first madam, Hu Yan, and the pregnant second madam to chat and bask in the sun. Yang Wu suddenly appeared with a document in his hand, and an anxious look on his face. Old Wu, what happened? Young heir saw Yang Wu's anxious expression, and walked over curiously. Old Wu, what happened? The verdict is out. A total of 8 people are sentenced to death and 32 people are going to different degrees of reform through labor. Yang Wu said in an excited voice. So fast. Beta Persei was also surprised after hearing it. It had only been 2 days since yesterday. Although he thought that Wu Qian might continue to be impartial, he did not expect it to be so fast, and the sentence was quite heavy. He reached out and grabbed the document. When he saw the names of Xie Kuan, Su Hao, and Madame Wuxia among the 8 people who were sentenced to death, he had to say with admiration, "I, Beta Persei, am rarely impressed by anyone other than the young master. Now I'm impressed by Wuxian." After a sigh, Beta Persei sent the document to Yang Chendong. He just glanced at it briefly and nodded. "I already know about the matter and I agree with this decision. In addition, all the leaders who were implicated will have to write a letter of self-criticism. They will also have to publicly review it in their respective units. If anyone disagrees or is in conflict, then report their name. I will personally send them to the countryside and personally choose a piece of land for them to live on for the rest of their lives. As for Wu Qian, the people around him are rotten. He should also reflect on it, and let him stay at home to reflect on his mistakes." Yang Chendong's order was quickly issued in the form of a document. Although Yang Chendong had returned to Qiqian City, he rarely expressed his opinions on some of the work below. Even if a department was not doing well, he would usually talk to its main leader in private. The number of times he gave orders in the form of a document like this was really rare. It was precisely because it was rare that it attracted attention and attention. Originally, when some of the people around the leaders were in trouble, they did not care and thought that they could just find another one. They did not even think about what they had done wrong, not to mention to do any inspection. But as soon as the document was issued, they knew that they had angered the 6th young master this time. At the moment, none of them dared to take a deep breath and immediately wrote a reflection in person with a proper attitude. Chapter 905. 8 people were killed and executed on the spot. The execution was carried out on the same night. From being caught to being sentenced, it did not even take 48 hours for them to lose their lives. As for the 32 people who were put through labor, they were also sent out of the city the next afternoon. It could be seen that if they did not work hard and get rid of their problems, they would have to work for the rest of their lives. The matter was resolved so quickly, which was out of many people's expectations. In Crimson Nest City, in a courtyard that was only the size of a courtyard, a valiant and handsome man was looking up at the sky. Looking at the bright moon in the sky, he could not help but say, "What a good method, how admirable." "What are you saying now?" Just as the man was looking at the moon, a woman's voice sounded beside him. It was gentle and pleasing to the ear. "Haha, it's nothing. I'm just admiring the 6th young master's boldness and methods. It should have been like this long ago. Some of the workers around the leaders are even more arrogant than the leaders. If we don't get rid of this trend, something will happen sooner or later." The man turned and smiled. When he looked at the woman in the courtyard, his face was as warm as spring. "That's right, my 6th brother is amazing. To be honest, when I was young, I did not know that he had such ability. Everything that has happened now makes me feel like I'm in a dream," the woman said with a smile as she got up and poured some warm tea for the man. There was only one person in the entire Crimson City who had the right to call Yang Chendong's 6th brother, and that was the Yang family's 7th sister, Yang Duo. In actuality, she was the one who had said those words. She had first left the capital of Baiming with Yang Chendong, and had just gotten used to the climate and environment of the origin city. Then, because Qiaoyin was pregnant, she had taken a boat to Crimson City. Only after coming here did Yang Duo know what a great undertaking was. After coming here, Yang Duo often walked around with the madams and quickly understood the situation in Crimson City. In particular, she knew that in this city, although marriage required the blessings of the parents, it also depended on one's own will. This was what people called free love. Furthermore, the madams had all said that half of the women who came to Qian City had taken the initiative to divorce and pursue their own happiness. Although it was only 5%, in a place like Crimson City that was already filled with people, this was not a small proportion. This also made her think. She never thought that she would really meet such a man on the street. Speaking of which, it was quite a coincidence. She originally thought that the security of Crimson City would be very good, so when she came out, she refused to bring any guards and only brought a maid to accompany her. However, because she accidentally exposed her wealth, she was still targeted. Just as the thief was about to steal, he was discovered by a man who suddenly appeared and caught red-handed. Young Duo was also sent to the nearby public security office as a witness. Only then did she know that the man's name was Long Tainan. What Young Duo didn't expect was that this man, who didn't even look 30 years old, was already the second in command of Crimson City's public security department. Although he was ranked last, he was still considered a high-ranking official. This kind of age and this kind of official position, in the Great Ming Dynasty, was absolutely impossible to appear. Which important minister did not go through more than 10, or even decades of ups and downs in the officialdom? While Young Duo was shocked, Long Tainan was even more shocked. He originally thought that this beautiful and intellectual woman would be a little panicked after knowing his identity. But who would have thought that she was so calm as if she didn't hear anything? It had to be said that Long Tainan could be considered to have seen countless people. Just when he was in the public security department, he didn't know how many people he had interacted with. Often, he could see a lot of things from the changes in other people's expressions. But when facing Young Duo, he found that his tricks seemed to be useless. The two of them were curious about each other at the same time. This was not a good thing for men and women. Just like this, the more they wanted to understand each other, the more they knew. Slowly, they finally understood each other's situation, but at the same time, they found that they had already fallen in love with each other. In this matter, Young Duo more or less felt inferior. After all, she was a divorced woman. Although it was a peaceful divorce, it definitely wouldn't be good if it was spread out. If Long Tainan was also divorced, it would be better, but this man was too perfect. He was almost 30 years old, but he had never been married. In his own words, he was poor in the past and couldn't get a wife. Later, Qiqian was owned by Yang Xia. As a native, he finally had a place to show his ability. He worked hard step by step to get to where he was today. After a lot of effort, he naturally didn't have time to pay too much attention to emotional issues, so he never got married. Young Duo was not a little girl who would easily believe the words of others. For this matter, she also found the fifth madam, and conducted a deep investigation on Long Tainan through the CIA. But the final result was that this person was very innocent. He had never left Ryukyu Island since he was a child. Such a person would definitely not have any problems. After knowing that Long Tainan really didn't intend to get close to her, Young Duo was relieved. This was mainly because she had been hurt in emotional issues and was really scared. But after a few years, after giving her feelings wholeheartedly again, it was out of control and she couldn't extricate herself. Now the two had reached the point where they were separated by a layer of gauze. If it weren't for Young Duo's noble status, Long Tainan was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. He didn't reject the fact that Young Duo had been married once, and it had nothing to do with her being the seventh sister of the sixth young master. In his own words, some feelings were there. He really liked Young Duo. But even if the two sides already liked each other, they still didn't intend to make this relationship public. In Young Duo's words, she didn't know what her sixth brother would think of this matter. Especially now that there were rumors that the Ministry of Public Security was going to be restructured. The former part-time minister, Yang Wu, would also have to step down and give up this position. When the time came, the competitors would be selected from the 5 vice ministers. Even Long Tainan didn't dare to make his feelings public at this time. Those who didn't know would think that he wanted to use marriage as a way to make his career smoother. If that was the case, Long Tainan wasn't willing to bear the reputation of relying on a woman to get to the top. The two's thoughts were very simple. Once the new minister's matter was settled, they would make this matter public. At that time, no one would say that he was relying on a woman's power. As the last of the 5 vice ministers, Long Tianan's qualifications were the lowest. He had also been the vice minister for the shortest time, so he had never thought much about this position. The so-called no desire was probably referring to people like him. Although he didn't have any further thoughts, it didn't mean that Long Tainan wouldn't comment on what happened in the Ministry of Supervision. One of the 32 people who were put through labor was the assistant of the vice minister of the Ministry of Public Security. Because of this matter, everyone knew that the vice minister wouldn't have the chance to be promoted this time, just like Long Tainan. After all, if you can't even manage the people around you, how can you manage a large department? A man and a woman talked about the past and the present under the moon. It was late into the night when young duo had to get up and return to the palace. After all, they weren't married yet. It wasn't good for a woman's reputation to spend the night outside. Although no one dared to control Yang Qindong's sister, she still had to be self-disciplined. Let me send you off. It's not safe on the road. Seeing that young duo was about to leave, Long Tainan said reluctantly, It's fine. After what happened last time, I brought guards with me when I went out. They're all armed with guns. No one dares to provoke me. Young duo smiled and left reluctantly. She was looking forward to their next meeting. In the palace, Yang Qindong was accompanying the fifth Madam Su Man. Ever since the second Madam, Xiao Yin, got pregnant, the other madams seemed to feel a sense of crisis. Since then, everyone counted their days. Once the time was right, they would invite Yang Qindong over. Regarding this, Yang Qindong could only feel that he was about to become a cedar. He couldn't complain about anything else. After all, each of his wives were outstanding beauties. As a man, what else could he complain about? Wouldn't that be a little inconsiderate? Tonight was the best time for Su Man, to get pregnant and give birth. Yang Qindong rushed over after having dinner with Xiao Yin. After a round of lovemaking, the two of them lay on the bed and hugged each other, not knowing when light footsteps came from outside. Then, without seeing anyone, a voice came in. Madam, seventh sister has returned to the palace. Okay, I understand. Su Man who was lying on the bed, replied. Then she buried her head in Yang Qindong's arms. You've worked hard. Yang Qindong kissed Su Man's forehead. Then, as if he remembered something, he said, Oh right, you said that you sent someone to investigate Long Tainan. How is it? You're still talking about it? I wanted to talk to you about serious matters first. Who knew that I would forget everything once I saw him? Su Man, complained coquettishly. But only the heavens knew that she had taken the initiative just now. With Yang Qindong's identity, they should be people from two different worlds. But not only did she become Yang Qindong's wife, she was also in charge of the huge Central Intelligence Agency. Just these were enough for her to be satisfied for the rest of her life. As for children, Su Man wanted one. But it wasn't to inherit the throne. She just wanted to leave behind a crystallization of their love, a witness, and a continuation of their lives. That was all. Yang Qindong felt Su Man's thoughts. That was why he treated her so well. He tightened his arms and hugged her even tighter. He asked, Tell me, what kind of person is this Long Tainan? You also know that my seventh sister was hurt emotionally once. I definitely won't let the same thing happen a second time. Chapter 906. Ever since Yang Duo came to Crimson City, the attention she received in the harem was no less than Yang Qindong's. After all, she was a member of the Yang family and the first person from the sixth young master's family to come to Crimson City. One could imagine how much importance she would receive, and how many women would curry favor with her. Everyone wanted to gain Yang Duo's friendship, so that they could integrate better into the Yang family. It was impossible to hide everything about Yang Duo. Not to mention, other than Tuoya and Su Maner, the other women knew Yang Duo before and had a good relationship with her. Her husbands were well aware of Yang Duo's failed marriage. They even knew that Yang Qindong had beaten up his seventh brother-in-law the first time he had come to the capital. As the women giggled about their husband's tyrannical behavior, they were even more keenly aware of the close relationship between the sixth young master and his big sister. Otherwise, why would he not do anything else after coming to the capital and instead do this first thing? Yang Qindong's importance was the women's importance. Yang Duo's personal problems also became something that the women had to worry about. They even wanted to build a relationship with her. They knew that the sixth young master wouldn't object to such a thing. They didn't expect that she would have a relationship with a golden bachelor like Long Tainan. This phrase was personally said by Yang Qindong. He used it as an analogy to those young and promising men who were in high positions, but had yet to marry. Sometimes he would even pretend to be disappointed, and say that it was a pity that he already had several wives and couldn't be a golden bachelor. Therefore, he attracted a lot of rolling eyes. Young Duo actually found Long Tainan. Even if she didn't request for an investigation, the other madams wouldn't take it lightly. As such, some things about this person were quickly investigated. In the end, the CIA and the Security Bureau jointly announced that there was no problem with this person. Yang Chendong also knew that for an official to be able to become a vice minister, his background must have been investigated thoroughly. There was definitely no problem with Long Tainan. However, that was not what he was thinking about. He was thinking about what kind of thoughts this man had when he came into contact with his seventh sister. Did he really not know Yang Duo's background? Or did he just like her? Furthermore, he clearly knew that she was his seventh elder sister, and took the initiative to befriend her. These were two completely different natures, which would ultimately lead to vastly different results. As Yang Chendong's wife, Sumaner naturally knew what he meant. Seeing that she had asked, he explained, "Our investigation shows that the two of them met purely by chance. It was the beginning of a hero saving a damsel in distress." At first, the two of them did not know each other's identities. Although seventh sister's identity was noble, because she had always been in the palace, not many people knew of her. Also, the thief who coveted seventh sister's money is still being punished and sentenced to 3 years in prison. From this result, we can basically rule out the possibility that it was man-made. According to our investigation, Long Tainan is a very prideful person. Back then, he had taken the earliest Lungfeng exam and even passed. However, considering that he was originally a local of Ryukyu Island, and that the local public security was also a big problem, they fought for his opinion to stay and work in the local area. I heard that in order to make him stay, the local officials even used prodding methods. The general idea was that even if he could be a good soldier, he might not be able to manage the local public security work. Under the provocation, as expected, he did not report to the military. Because of this, the military even fought a lawsuit with the local government for a while. Hearing Sumaner's introduction, Yang Chendong did not smile at all. Instead, he snorted coldly, "Immature." Sumaner ignored him. Men were like this. When the woman close to them was about to get married, it was as if they were about to lose something. Under such circumstances, it was very difficult to say that they would find other people pleasing to the eye. This was her husband throwing a tantrum in front of her, and also showing that he did not treat her as an outsider. Sumaner was happy in her heart and continued, "This person's ability is still quite good. He relied on his own hard work to climb up step by step. According to our investigation, during the work period, he did not have any close contact with any officials. Even Sir Yu Qian, who is in charge of a city, he only went to visit him once with his colleagues during the new year. This is already very rare among the cadres at the secondary level. Yes, he's not someone who wants to climb up to others. That's one point." Yang Chendong expressed his opinion once again. Hearing this, Sumaner, who was at the side, was amused. "Husband, then your attitude means that you agree to this matter? It's still too early to say these things. We'll talk about it after I find a chance to meet him." Yang Chendong did not make a decision immediately. Instead, he wanted to observe. He even had a tentative plan in his heart. He wanted to see how this Long Tainan would solve the problem. No one knew what the two of them talked about next. However, on the second day, a piece of news began to spread in the Public Security Department. That was, the next department head had been chosen. Whoever it was would be announced when the time came. Once the news was out, the expressions of the other secondary managers who were still trying to pull strings and possibly taking up the position instantly turned ugly. Since it had already been decided, it was obviously too late for them to do anything else. In his own office, Long Tainan also heard about this matter from his assistant. However, he only smiled and accepted it. Originally, he did not want to be an official. As long as he could work hard, it was the same no matter who became the department head. Originally, he thought that the matter had been settled, and everyone could put their minds on work. However, he did not expect that another piece of news would spread. It was said that considering that there were already 5 secondary managers in the public security department, there were already too many of them. One of them had to be eliminated, and this person was very likely to be Long Tainan, who was at the bottom of the list. Once the news came out, the assistant hurriedly reported it, and then asked the leader to find someone to inquire about it. Long Tainan was not in a hurry. He thought that such a thing was impossible. It was true that he was at the bottom of the list, but he was also the youngest. He was also very capable. He did not think that this news was true. It was just a rumor. When was there ever a change in personnel that was not like this? However, Long Tainan did not take it seriously. He did not expect that the city lord mansion of Wuxian would spread the news that afternoon. It said that in this change of work, there would be two people who would no longer hold the position of secondary manager. They were the secondary manager of the Ministry of Supervision, Wuxian, and the secondary manager of the Public Security Department, Long Tainan. The news came from the city lord mansion, so there was no need to doubt its accuracy. At this moment, Long Tainan was indeed a little flustered. He did not understand why this was happening. However, if it was because he was young, then why did they promote him to the position of secondary manager? Originally, he was working well down there. Wasn't this playing with him? Filled with confusion, Long Tainan returned to the mansion unhappily. Tonight, young duo came again. Originally, the two of them did not meet so often. After all, even if they were in a relationship, they had to pay attention to the influence, not to mention that the other party was the sister of the sixth young master. However, it was precisely because she heard about Long Tianan's matter that young duo felt that it was necessary for her to appear. When they met, she even bluntly asked what was going on. If needed, she could go and ask Yang Chendong. If this was said by someone else, it was very likely that they were bragging. However, who was young duo? She would do what she said. If she made up her mind, even if Yang Chendong was already resting, he would still have to dress up neatly and come out to welcome her. There's no need. On the other hand, the moment Long Tainan saw young duo, the gloominess on his face disappeared. I can't let one person take all the benefits. For me to be able to meet you is already a blessing from the heavens. As for my position as secondary manager, I'll just let it go. I'm still young anyway. As long as I have a job to do, it's fine. Not only did Long Tainan appear to be so open-minded, but he had also thought it through. He even thought that it was probably because the sixth young master knew about his and young duo's matter. Considering the idea of avoiding relatives, he removed the position of secondary manager. However, at the same time, it also meant that he was already seriously considering his marriage with young duo. Young duo was a smart person. No matter what, she still had the genes of the Yang family. She quickly understood the meaning of this sentence. Then, her expression changed and she said shyly, "What are you talking about? Could it be that he already knows about our matter?" Hee, that's not strange. The sixth young master can find out about the entire Crimson City, and even the entire Ryukyu Island if he wants to. Long Tianan's expression became a lot more serious. From the bottom of his heart, he really respected Yang Chendong, who was younger than him. Originally, young duo came aggressively, thinking that someone was trying to make things difficult for Long Tainan. What, did they think there was no one behind them? If someone really thought that, then she would use facts to tell them that their thinking was very wrong. However, after Long Tianan's persuasion, she knew that it was very likely that the result would be different. She was relieved. After a while, she forgot about the purpose of coming here, and changed it to the two of them talking about their hearts under the moonlight. One night passed. The next day, the city lord's mansion issued a decision in the form of a document. The two secondary managers, Wuxian and Long Tainan, were removed from their positions. As for the new job, there was no mention of it. They were only told to have a good rest first. When the news came out, there was an uproar. Long Tainan was young. Being able to become a secondary manager did attract some envy and even jealousy. However, it was already very difficult for him to become a minister. This time he was not selected and did not even become a secondary manager. No one was surprised. However, some people said strange things. They said that Long Tainan used connections to attract the anger of the higher-ups and so on. In short, they were all derogatory words. They were just adding insult to injury. However, Wu Qian's matter attracted a lot of controversy. Chapter 907. Previously, Wu Qian's assistant and family members had indeed made mistakes, but Vice Minister Wu himself had not done anything wrong. Not only that, his performance in this matter was not bad. He acted swiftly and decisively, and once again displayed his impartial side. At that time, it really caused many people to praise him. But now, it seemed that a problem was a problem. Even if you made up for it well afterwards, you still could not erase the fact that you had made a mistake. Wu Qian's residence, which had very few friends because he was too principled, became even more deserted at this moment. There was almost no one who came to visit him. This matter also caused many officials with integrity to be disappointed. If even Wu Qian had such an outcome, then would they still dare to follow in his footsteps in the future? Were they not afraid of becoming the second Wu Qian? The entire Crimson City's official system was turbulent because of this, and the atmosphere was even somewhat oppressive. Some righteous people could not help but feel sad. Some people who were seeking personal gain were also intimidated by the 8 death sentences and the sentence of the 32 labor camp members. They became cautious and did not dare to act rashly. It gave people the feeling that they could not do anything even if they had done something. Then what should they do? As one of the people involved in this matter, Wu Qian was leisurely staying at home. This was not just a saying, it was really leisurely. As the saying goes, without an official position, one's body would be light. The days in the Ministry of Supervision were very busy. Now that he had time to rest, he could sleep early and wake up late. He also seemed to be fatter than before. After being removed from his position, the house was not taken back. Wu Qian also peacefully stayed at home. When he had nothing to do, he would practice martial arts in the courtyard to train his body. When he was hungry, he would cook for himself. It was quite carefree, but this carefree life was quickly disrupted. On the 10th day of Wu Qian's idle prose, the gatekeeper suddenly appeared with a panicked expression. Wu Qian's face flashed with dissatisfaction towards this old man who had followed him for a few years, and yet was still so unsettled in the face of trouble. A person without determination was destined to not be able to achieve great things. However, Wu Qian did not have the habit of scolding his subordinates. This dissatisfaction quickly disappeared and he asked, "What happened? Did someone come to take back the house?" Since he was removed from his position, in Wu Qian's opinion, it was only a matter of time before the house was taken back. Although he loved his current job, who asked him to be the one who did not know how to judge people, based on the mistakes made by the people around him, it was reasonable for him to be implicated and even be removed from his position. At worst, he could just go home and farm. Wasn't that what most people did? There was nothing wrong with it. No, no, master. The old gatekeeper shook his head repeatedly. Who is that? Could it be that someone is here to capture me? Wu Qian shook his head as he spoke. This was the worst outcome he could think of. Although he didn't think that he had done anything wrong, there were some things that weren't right just because you didn't think they were wrong. He had vaguely heard that the 6th young master attached great importance to the matter of his assistant, Xiekuan. If that was the case, then it was very likely that he would be caught as an example. Perhaps he was really unlucky. Master, no, it's 6th madam. Seeing that his master had guessed wrongly again and again, the old gatekeeper was so anxious that he blurted out what had caused him to be so flustered. What? At this moment, Wu Qian's expression changed again. He had already forgotten that he had just said that the old gatekeeper wasn't calm. He was able to become the vice minister of the Ministry of Supervision today, because of the 6th madam's efforts and words. He was very grateful in his heart. Even when something happened this time, someone had tactfully reminded him that he should complain to the 6th madam, but he didn't listen to the advice. In his opinion, the 6th madam had already spoken for him. He was the one who didn't know the right person. How could he still have the face to look for the 6th madam? Therefore, if Wu Qian were to see who he was most afraid of, the 6th madam would definitely be on the list, and she was ranked at the top. It was just that if you didn't look for others but others insisted on looking for you, how could you stop and refuse? When he heard that the 6th madam had condescended to come to his residence, Wu Qian instinctively tidied his clothes, then quickly got up and walked out of the courtyard. Without waiting for Wu Qian to go out and welcome her, a group of female soldiers appeared first. They were almost the same height. After wearing the same green military uniform, They looked as if they were carved from the same mold, valiant and formidable. Their eyes were like eagles as they scanned the surroundings. Among them, the sixth madam, Luan Xiaoyu, was walking in the middle. To be specific, Luan Xiaoyu hadn't married the sixth young master yet. She was already 17 years old this year, but there was still a year before the legal age of marriage in Crimson Nest City. Since the law was set by the sixth young master himself, he naturally had to abide by it. Although the wedding banquet hadn't been held, everyone had already started to call her the sixth madam. Luan Xiaoyu didn't reject this. Perhaps she really liked this form of address. When Luan Xiaoyu appeared, Wuqian immediately knelt on the ground and said, "Sinner Wuqian greets the sixth madam. Get up." Luan Xiaoyu looked at Wuqian and found that he didn't look dispirited because he was idle at home. He seemed to be in good spirits. She smiled and said, "Lord Wu seems to be in good spirits. It seems that you have rested well." "Thank you for your concern, sixth madam. Everything is well with Wu Qian." Wu Qian stood up and cupped his hands. "Oh, is it true? Could it be that you are happy now that you have been removed from your position? Is it because you have never thought of working for Yang Xie? Or are you lying to me?" Although Luan Xiaoyu was only 17 years old, she had already been training for a few years. The way she spoke and treated people was naturally not something an ordinary girl could compare to. Even when facing Wu Qian, when she said these words, she similarly felt a sudden pressure, giving people a lot of pressure. I don't dare. Wu Qian hurriedly shook his head. "Sinner knows that he is guilty. It is only right that I be removed from my position. Everything is Qian's fault, so I will not be dissatisfied." Wu Qian's reaction was very fast. However, after he finished speaking, a voice suddenly sounded. "Do you not know how to, or do you not dare?" A man's voice suddenly sounded. Wu Qian looked in the direction of the voice and saw a row of male soldiers appear behind the female soldiers. They were all wearing black armor. Even their faces were completely covered by the armor. Only pairs of spirited eyes and nostrils that were used for breathing could be seen. It was unavoidably intimidating. When this formation appeared, Wu Qian's eyes flashed with shock. He immediately knelt down again and said with a panicked expression, "Sinner greets the sixth young master." "Oh, your reaction is not bad. You guessed that the young master is here so quickly. However, you still haven't answered my question." As the voice sounded for the second time, Yang Chendong appeared in front of Wu Qian. He was still dressed in green, and his face had not changed much compared to a few years ago. The only change was that there was an additional aura of a superior on his body. Yes, Sinner does not know how to, but also does not dare. Wu Qian knew that playing tricks in front of Yang Chendong was a joke, so he spoke the truth. This answer is honest. All right, you can't expect me and madam to stand in your courtyard. Are you so poor that you don't even have tea?" Yang Chendong was quite satisfied with this answer. If Wu Qian had only said that he did not know how to, he would have turned around and walked out. Yes, please enter the main room. Sinner will lead the way." Wu Qian's mind was still blank. He did not understand why the sixth young master and Luan Xiaoyu would come to his residence when he had been removed from his position. What was going on? With a myriad of thoughts in his mind, Wu Qian led the way while pondering the reason. Yang Chendong, who was behind him, also walked at a moderate pace. He looked around from time to time and nodded occasionally. It could be seen that Wu Qian was really poor. Normally, as the vice minister of the Ministry of Supervision, Wu Qian's monthly salary should not be a small amount. At least, it should not be a problem for him to support his family. However, both his concubine and assistant had met with mishap, and they had spent quite a lot of money using their authority. He had used his many years of savings to make up for the deficit. Even so, he was still short of a sum of money. Wu Qian, who had no savings, dismissed most of the servants in his house. Other than a gatekeeper, there was only a cook. One was for his face, and the other was for his heart. They were both inseparable. This was also the reason why Yang Chendong only saw a gatekeeper and a servant when he entered the Wu residence. In the main hall, Wu Qian personally brewed tea and served it to Yang Chendong and Luan Xiaoyu. Then he stood to the side and bowed, as if he was listening to instructions. "All right, Since this is your residence, it is not good for us to usurp the role of host. Take a seat. Ever since Yang Chendong appeared, he had completely occupied the dominant position. He did not look like a guest at all. Yes. Wu Qian hurriedly agreed. The sixth young master had asked him to take a seat. If he did not take a seat, it would mean that he was not giving face to the sixth young master. This was also a crime that he could not bear. Wu Qian's but had just touched the chair when Yang Chendong's voice rang out beside him. He had no choice but to stand up again and return respectfully. How are your reflections at home these past few days? Replying to the sixth young master, Wu Qian knows that his sins are grave. No matter how you punish me, I will plead guilty. It can't be considered a grave sin. It is just that you did not know how to judge a person. You can still be saved. However, one must learn from the president's teachings. Mistakes can be made, but the same mistake must not be made again. Do you understand? Yang Chendong was very satisfied with Wu Qian's attitude. If the other party thought that he was not in the wrong and continued to be stubborn, then this person could not be used. Yang Chendong had always believed that honest officials were not equal to capable officials. There were many honest officials who were not as useful as capable corrupt officials. At least corrupt officials knew how to do things and make money by taking advantage of the situation. However, some honest officials did not do anything. They only did things half-heartedly. Sometimes such people would spoil things. Chapter 908. If one wanted to become one of the higher-ups in Yangxia, one's personal integrity was not enough. That was just a standard to measure how useful a person was. First, one had to have this foundation. Then one's ability would be measured. As long as one had outstanding ability, knew how to do things, and knew when to yield and when to stand tall, such a cadre was what he urgently needed. Yes, I will remember it. I will not make the same mistake twice. Although Wu Qian did not know what Yang Chendong meant, he still replied instinctively. Good. Since that is the case, Sixth Madam recommends you to be the head of the anti-corruption department. What do you think? Since he had already admitted his mistake, and the matter was not his fault, Yang Chendong decided to give Wu Qian a chance. I have no objections. I will listen to the sixth young master's arrangements and orders. Wu Qian instinctively replied. But the moment he said that, he was stunned. Anti-corruption department? What department is that? Why have I not heard of it before? Of course you have not heard of it. This time, it was Luan Xiaoyu who answered him. Sir Wu, this is a new department set up by the sixth young master. You should know from the name that it is mainly focused on official corruption. The sixth young master believes that people's hearts are hard to satisfy. Not to mention those officials who hold great power. To them, just the supervision of the Department of Supervision is far from enough. With the anti-corruption department, everything would be different. The two departments could take care of things at the same time. In this way, the officials who had done something wrong but still thought they were lucky would know that even if they could deal with the Ministry of Supervision, the anti-corruption department was also a mountain that could not be leaped over. This was the so-called double supervision. Oh right, this anti-corruption department is of the same level as the Department of Supervision. You will be the head, so you can do whatever you want. Wu Qian was originally someone that Luan Xiaoyu had her eyes on. He was also a talent that she promoted when she was the leader of the five-man team. Now that Wu Qian was in an important position, it was equivalent to acknowledging all of Luan Xiaoyu's actions in Chendong City. If Luan Xiaoyu personally gave this order, it would highlight her reputation. It would let those who thought that she was going to lose power, and those who were watching on the sidelines know that she was the sixth madam, the unchangeable sixth madam. His previous self-examination of his movements was also correct. Anyone who questioned his decision would be questioning the sixth young master's decision. That would be unacceptable to the entire Chiken city, the entire Ryukyu Island, and even the entire Yangxia Island. Wu Qian listened to Luan Xiaoyu's words seriously. At this moment, his face was already covered in tears. At this point he understood everything. Whether it was the previous suspension or dismissal, it was just a test. First, he had to cut off the source of all evil around him before giving him a heavy responsibility. In the end, Everything was for his own good. After understanding all of this, Wuxian bowed to the ground again and kowtowed. Thank you, sixth madam. Thank you, sixth young master. I will definitely live up to your expectations. I will do my best until the day I die. Wu Qian had clearly submitted. Luan Xiaoyu turned her head and smiled at Yang Qindong. She knew that Big Brother wouldn't wrong any good person. Thinking about how she had pleaded with Big Brother before, how laughable was that? With Yang Qindong's ability and sharp eyes, was there anything that could be easily hidden from him? Yang Qindong also smiled. After the investigation, he found that Wu Qian, who was not an official during this period of time, had performed very well. He did not make a fuss nor was he decadent. Only such a person could be reborn. Only such a person would shine brightly when placed in an important position. Wu Qian accepted his new position. What followed was Yang Qindong's warning. Other than reminding him to be careful when using people in the future, he also told him about the establishment of the anti-corruption department. The location had already been chosen. It was also a 4-story building that occupied a large area. As for the personnel, he could transfer them from all over the place. In short, he would give you whatever you wanted. However, the results of the work had to be shown. Other places didn't matter. Within 3 months, Chiken City wouldn't allow any corrupt officials or officials who used their power for personal gain. Within half a year, the entire Ryukyu Island wouldn't allow any corrupt officials to appear. Otherwise, if he found out, Wu Qian's position as minister would be over. Catch them at the root. In the future, the political department will also seriously review the promoted officials. They will require their assets to be publicly announced, their previous records to be publicly announced, and their personal talents to be publicly announced. In the process of these 3 announcements, if there are any problems, they have to be carefully investigated. In short, don't give corrupt officials a place to live. Yes, sixth young master. I will remember. Wu Qian said very seriously. Since Yang Qindong trusted him so much, he had to act. He wanted to do everything for the sake of the public. He wanted those problematic officials to hear his name in the future to be unconsciously afraid. About an hour later, Yang Qindong and the 6th madam walked out of the Wu estate. There was no one nearby. Luan Xiaoyu said happily, Big Brother, thank you. I should be the one thanking you. Thank you for finding a talent for our Chiken city. Hehe. Luan Xiaoyu was very happy after being praised. Then she looked left and right, and found that this wasn't the road back to the palace. She asked curiously, Big Brother, where are we going now? We're going to Vice Minister Long Tianan's house. Yang Qindong replied with a smile. After solving Wu Qian's problem, it was time to solve the other minister candidate. In the Long estate, compared to Wu Qian's place, it was quite lively. At least Long Tainan had Yang Duo by his side. Since Long Tainan was removed from his position, Yang Duo came more frequently. After Long Tainan lost his position, he didn't have to be as scrupulous as before. Instead, he could express his love for Yang Duo more naturally. Previously, there were all sorts of rumors, but once the matter became true, Yang Duo really wanted to ask her younger brother what was going on. Wu Qian had committed the crime of not knowing how to use people. What crime did Long Tainan commit? In this regard, Long Tainan expressed a very clear refusal. In his words, he wasn't originally committed to the position, but because he really wanted to do something. Since there was no such opportunity now, then he would just go home and do farming. At that time, his wife and children would warm the bed. It would also be a wonderful thing. But he was worried that Yang Duo couldn't bear the hardships. Yang Duo listened to Long Tianan's plan for the future, and her face was full of joy. She was also a person who liked to fight. Many years of education told her that her man was her sky. Therefore, she yearned to go to the countryside and do farming. As for whether she would dislike it or not, if she was really keen on people with power, then she could just ask Yang Qindong for a job. Why did she have to get it from her husband? It was precisely because of Yang Duo's simplicity and kindness that made Long Tainan very fond of her. In the past 10 days, the relationship between the two had been rapidly warming up. It was even to the point of discussing marriage. They were only waiting for the higher-ups to make arrangements for Long Tainan. Once all his official positions were removed, Then they could leave here and find a place on the island where few people knew them to live a good life. All of this was so beautiful, but it was all disrupted by the sudden arrival of Yang Chendong. The gatekeeper nervously reported that a large group of people had arrived outside. When a young man among them claimed to be the sixth young master, his legs were still spinning. Obviously, he couldn't believe this fact. Who was the sixth young master? How could he come to a house where an official was removed? On the other hand, Yang Duo wasn't surprised, but she was still worried. Instinctively, she thought that her sixth brother's appearance was for her. After all, she wasn't anyone to Long Tainan yet. A woman always running around in a man's house. It wouldn't be good if word got out. Tainan, don't say anything later. I'll deal with everything. If he pushes me too hard, I won't let him interfere with my freedom of marriage, even if I threaten him with death. Staying in Qiqian City, she didn't learn anything else, but the word freedom was often mentioned. Long Tainan wanted to stand up and say something, but he also knew that in front of someone like the sixth young master, he had no right to speak. If he didn't do it well, it would make things even more embarrassing. So he nodded. Okay, Duo Heir, don't worry. If he really pushes me too hard, I'll fight to the end even if I have to give up my life. Okay. Yang Duo nodded gratefully, and then walked with Long Tainan to the gate. Outside the gate of Long Mansion, Yang Chendong and Luan Xiaoyu had been waiting here for a while. It had been half an hour since the gatekeeper went to report, but no one had come to greet them. Beta Persei, who was leading the team, was already impatient. What the hell is this Long Tainan doing? Is he angry because he was removed from his position and won't open the door? No, let's wait a little longer. Yang Chendong shook his head lightly, but even though he said this, he was also unhappy. If it wasn't for the fact that the other party was most likely his sixth brother-in-law, he was afraid that at this moment, he would really break the door down. Fortunately, before Yang Chendong's anger reached its boiling point, the door opened from the inside, and Long Tainan and Yang Duo appeared in front of him. Sixth sister? Yang Chendong was naturally surprised to see Yang Gua here. He only heard from the madams that seventh sister would go to Long Mansion when she had nothing to do, but he didn't expect to bump into her. What? Are you surprised? Aren't you here to look for me? Looking at Yang Chendong's widened eyes, Yang Duo first put on an angry expression, but then she thought of something. Maybe her sixth brother really wasn't here to look for her, but she misunderstood. Who was Long Tainan? He was someone who dealt with criminals every day, so he could see everything clearly in an instant. It seemed that Yang Duo misunderstood the sixth young master. She immediately said respectfully, "Sixth young master, please come in for a chat." Chapter 909. Okay. At this moment, Yang Chendong had also recovered his calm. He nodded and strode into the courtyard. Luan Xiaoyu wanted to follow him in, but Yang Duo came up and purposely walked further behind Yang Chendong. She asked in a small voice what was going on. After a few days of training, Luan Xiaoyu was also very smart. She smiled and said that Yang Duo misunderstood, and that the sixth young master came to talk business with Long Tainan. After knowing that she guessed wrongly, Yang Duo's face turned red. This time, she had wronged Yang Chendong. But so what? She was the elder sister. She had this privilege. Moreover, this was a good opportunity. It was better to make things clear. Yang Chendong entered the main hall under Long Tianan's guidance. Yang Duo pulled Luan Xiaoyu and followed behind. She was worried that her brother would bully her future husband. Luan Xiaoyu, who was forcefully pulled in, saw all this and smiled. As a woman, she could understand Yang Duo's thoughts. When Yang Chendong saw that seventh sister had caught up with him so quickly, a bitter smile flashed through his heart. He didn't say any words of greeting and bluntly asked Long Tainan what she thought of the security of Crimson City, and if there were any measures. As soon as the topic came out, Yang Duo became obedient. There were some things that she couldn't participate in and understand. Although she had a lot of questions in her heart, she couldn't say a word. Long Tainan quickly got into his role and reported the things that he saw, heard, understood, and came into contact with as the Vice Minister of Public Security. Sixth young master, people are divided into different grades and ranks. Even among the aristocratic families, There are capable people, and there are also wastrels. This is even more so for commoners. Some people are lazy by nature. Even if you give them a mountain of gold and silver, they will eat it all. And once they don't have money, they can only think of other ways. This kind of illegal thing has appeared. Moreover, they are emerging endlessly, and they can't be stopped despite repeated prohibitions. You're right, but we have to find a way to solve this problem. At least, we have to let those who want to take risks know what they can't do. Otherwise, they won't be able to make a comeback for the rest of their lives. Yang Chendong nodded in agreement. Throughout the ages, there would always be some bad elements appearing, even in prosperous times. This was the reason and necessity for the existence of the Public Security Department. If you want to reduce this risk, then you have to be heavy-handed. You have to put in a lot of effort in the area of punishment. This is the principle of killing the chicken to warn the monkey. At the same time, they could also think of some solutions from the root. For example, all the villages, townships, counties, cities, and even the street offices in the cities had to participate. While vigorously disseminating the law, they could create more personal files. Some of the troublesome ones would be the focus of their attention. Once they discovered any problems with them, they would immediately talk to them and correct their mistakes. This way, supervision would become a routine. Even if they can't be watched for a while and do something wrong, we can quickly find our target from this information. We can quickly arrest them and bring them to justice. This will restore peace to the people and make a list of the bad guys. For example, we can also set up a reward system. Give rewards to those who report. This way, even if it's for the sake of benefits, people will still pay attention to others. Maybe we can also set up some joint measures. For example, if any of the 3 clans commit a crime, the 3 clans will not be allowed to work in the unit. They will also be disqualified from joining the Cold Front as auxiliary soldiers. Their family members will also not be allowed to work or go to school in the city. This way, more people will help us supervise their family members. This will be more effective in controlling the crime rate. Of course, if we do this, we will need the cooperation of many departments. We will also need to fork out a lot of money. Not bad. After listening to Long Tianan's report, Yang Chendong knew that this person must have a mature plan in mind. He couldn't help but sigh. Opportunities were indeed prepared for those who were prepared. The problem you raised and the solution are very good. How about this? Go back and write a detailed plan and report it to me. If there are no problems, we will use this as the standard to distribute it. We just need to fork out some money. Compared to the damage their crimes will cause to the city and the people, this is nothing. Thank you, 6th young master. Long Tainan quickly clasped his fist to express his gratitude. You don't have to thank me. Just do your job well in the future. This time, I'm actually here to inform you that the Public Security Department will be transformed into the Ministry of Public Security. The intention is to maintain public order. When the time comes, this department will be responsible for the security of the entire island. It will also be responsible for arresting those who break the law and guiding the security of other provinces. It's a difficult task. What do you think? Is there a problem with you being the department head? After Yang Chendong finished speaking, he looked at Long Tainan with a smile. The biggest reason Yang Chendong admired Wuxia and Long Tainan was that they knew when to advance and when to retreat. Speaking of which, one of them had a good personal relationship with the 6th madam, and the other was more likely to become his 7th brother-in-law. After they were removed from their positions, they could have asked someone to pass on the message that they were looking for a new position. However, they didn't. This alone made him satisfied. Although if they really did so, for the sake of the 6th madam and 7th sister, he wouldn't be stingy and would arrange a new position for them. However, the position would definitely not be as important as it was now. It was because these 2 people knew when to advance and retreat that Yang Chendong gave them a great opportunity. He also believed that once these 2 people agreed to this appointment, they would definitely be able to do this job well. Now he was just waiting for Long Tianan's answer. Long Tainan didn't immediately agree. He hesitated for a few breaths of time before he raised his head and asked carefully, 6th young master, I'm still young. My qualifications. You don't have to worry about this. The candidates for the Vice Minister of the newly established Ministry of Public Security will be approved by you. At that time, they will have no choice but to bow their heads. As for qualifications, I'm younger than you." Yang Chendong laughed loudly. Long Tainan could only be the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Public Security if he agreed. With this condition, those Vice Ministers had to show their loyalty. If anyone dared to not cooperate, then they would have no chance to be the Vice Minister. With this condition, he had the biggest trump card. Those Vice Ministers had no choice but to bow their heads. At this moment, Long Tainan finally felt relieved. He also knew that Yang Chendong was entrusting him with an important task, thinking that through his own efforts he could change the public security of the entire Yangtze force. At this moment, he had already thrown the matter of farming to the countryside to his ear. He promised, "Long Tainan is willing to go through fire and water for the 6th young master. I won't hesitate to die 1,000 times." Haha, good. Yang Chendong was very satisfied when he heard such a promise. However, he didn't forget to mention that the public security situation would change a little in 3 months, and a big change in half a year. If the public security situation still didn't improve, then he would punish them. Long Tainan was still very confident about this. As long as everything was as he said in his suggestion, he was confident that the public security crime rate would be reduced to a minimum. Immediately he nodded and agreed. Young Duo looked at this scene from the side. She knew that the idea of leaving the city with Long Tainan and farming in the countryside couldn't be realized. She couldn't help but sigh and say, "Men, all of them are obsessed with power." Hearing this sentence, Wan Xiaoyu just covered her mouth and chuckled. At this time, Yang Chendong also looked over. After his gaze fell on Yang Duo, he coughed lightly. "What's going on between you and my 7th sister?" "6th young master, we really love each other." Long Tainan knew that there had to be a conclusion to some things, so he took the initiative to admit it. "Really love each other? Do you know that my 7th sister has been hurt emotionally?" Yang Chendong's face also became cold. This matter related to 7th sister's future happiness, so there was no room for carelessness. "I know. I haven't seen what the previous person was like, but he must be a bastard. He didn't know how to cherish such a good woman." Long Tianan's eyes flashed with hostility. He was obviously a little angry. Seeing that Long Tainan didn't look like he was faking it, Yang Chendong nodded. "I have always been a very reasonable person. But if you bully my 7th sister in the future, or betray her feelings, then I will definitely make you wish you were dead." These words are effective for life. You have to think about it carefully. There are some things that you can regret now. Yang Duo, who was at the side, heard these words. Hearing Yang Chendong threaten Long Tainan like this, she couldn't bear it, and wanted to say something. However, Luan Xiaoyu pulled her back in time and shook her head at her. Right now, Yang Chendong was standing up for Yang Duo. If she interjected now, then all those words would have been for nothing. Long Tainan didn't answer the question immediately. He could feel that the 6th young master wasn't just saying that for fun. Instead, the 6th young master was truly moved. If such a day really came, it would be impossible for him to escape unscathed. But he really liked Yang Duo, so he naturally didn't fear this kind of threat. Long Tainan slowly raised his head and looked at Yang Chendong, who was staring at him, and said word by word, "I will treat Duo Air well for the rest of my life. This isn't because she is the 6th young master's sister, but because I truly love her." "Good, very good. I believe you can do it. Since it's like this, if my 7th sister doesn't object, then prepare to get married. Do it before the Ministry of Public Security is established." Yang Chendong could see that all these words came from Long Tianan's heart. Since his 7th sister was willing, of course he wouldn't break them up. Not to mention, he was also very optimistic about Long Tianan's character and ability. Choosing the wedding before the Ministry of Public Security was naturally to tell Long Tainan that for the smooth progress of work, he could take advantage of the situation. Presumably, with his title as the 6th young master's brother-in-law, there wouldn't be many people who dared to play tricks with him. Yang Chendong was about to leave the Long mansion. Yang Duo hugged him and cried. She was grateful to her brother. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong, she would probably still be bombing the capital. It was unknown if she could even endure until today. All right, seventh sister, you're going to be a bride soon. You won't look good if your eyes are swollen from crying. The palace will still be your home in the future. You can come back whenever you want. If anyone disagrees, tell me and I'll teach them a lesson. Yang Chendong patted Yang Duo's back and said while pretending to be fierce. Annoying. Yang Duo laughed through her tears. At this moment, her smile was like a spring flower blooming on a branch. Chapter 9-10. A day later, the documents regarding the establishment of the Anti-Corruption Department and the Public Security Department were issued. There was no sign before, so when the documents were issued, many people were stunned, especially when they saw that the new ministers of the two departments had been decided, and that they were Wu Qian and Long Tainan, who had been dismissed previously. Many people immediately regretted it. If they had known earlier, they would have gone to the cold stove. Perhaps they would have been able to seek suitable positions in the two new departments now. In the palace, after Yang Chendong issued the documents, he didn't care about this matter anymore. Instead, he focused on another matter. This morning, the Security Bureau reported that the Spanish ships stopped at the port of Cologne. At the port of Campo of the House of Phnom Penh, 200 muskets were sold there. As soon as the news came out, the Security Bureau personnel in charge there felt that the situation was serious and quickly reported it on the radio. In the palace hall, Commander Gao Xiong of the 1st Marine Army and Commander Leng Song of the 1st Marine Division stood opposite Yang Chendong, standing tall and straight. Borimov is not honest. After Yang Chendong said this, he looked at the two generals and asked, "Let's talk, what do you think?" Sixth young master, it's our Navy's fault for not being able to stop the foreign ships from appearing in time. I request to join the battle and destroy this caravan as an example. Gao Xiong was the first to express his opinion, and expressed his willingness to fight at all costs. This time, when Yang Chendong returned to Chichen City, he told him about the foreign merchant ships. He asked them to be watched because the current merchant ships were just scouting, and once the situation here was clear, the next one may not be a merchant ship but a warship. Although Gao Xiong's ability was good, and he was also ruthless as a pirate, he didn't think that these foreign merchant ships could pose a threat to them. Whether it was financial resources, military strength, or firearms, he was stronger than the opponent. Since they were willing to pay for protection, it was a good thing for him. Forcing them to leave was really a bit unreasonable. He didn't know the history of later generations. He didn't know the ambitions of the Westerners, and he didn't know that Macau would be colonized by Portugal for many years. Therefore, even though Yang Chendong had mentioned this matter, he had only arranged for people to pay more attention to these foreign merchant ships, and had no intention of dealing with them. But now the Spanish caravan wanted to sell firearms to the Golden Border dynasty, which was tantamount to supporting the enemy. If it was not dealt with, who knew what the two sides would trade next time? Once everyone had firearms, the safety of Vietnam and Laos would be worrying. Yes, we have to fight. It's just that I think that not only should we attack the Spanish caravan, but we also need to warn the Golden Border dynasty to hand over their guns. Otherwise, don't blame us for launching a large-scale attack. Leng Song, the head of the 1st Division, also expressed his intention to fight. The duty of the army was not only to protect the safety of the territory. Sometimes, showing off their fists was a better way to show the necessity of their existence. There was already a 1st Army at sea, but there was no sign of establishing a 1st Army on land. Perhaps this was a good opportunity. Both generals asked for a fight. This time, it was Yang Chendong's turn to ponder. War was not a game. There were too many things involved, including the mobilization of soldiers, logistical support, replenishment of weapons, occupation of cities and regions after victory, post-war reconstruction, and so on. These all required a lot of money. It would not be wise to rashly start a war without considering all of this. Well, I'll think about it. You can go and prepare first. The Navy is responsible for keeping an eye on those merchant ships. Once there is an order, destroy them in the shortest time possible. Yang Chendong did not immediately give an order, but instead he wanted to think about it, which was somewhat beyond the expectations of the two generals. But this was the meaning of the sixth young master, so they had to obey. They immediately agreed and left the hall. They did not know that this time, Yang Chendong did not immediately order the troops to attack. That was also his reason. Because this time, what he wanted was not only to teach the Golden Border dynasty a lesson, but also to prepare for a war to destroy the country. Since he wanted to destroy the country, if he did not prepare in advance, how could he occupy such a large territory? If he did not handle it well, he would have made a wedding dress for others. So he did not do anything. Once he did, he was bound to get the biggest benefits. As such, just the number of people needed was a huge number. Once the Golden Border dynasty was destroyed, it would become another province of Yangtze, just like Vietnam and Laos. Then how many people should be placed there to further rule it and form a general trend? Firmly controlling it and preventing civil strife was one of the first things to consider. The grassland was now stable. Not long after he left, he had fought several big battles. For a while, there should not be any enemies there. But there had been no news from the three masters of Lungfeng, Wu Sheng and Chen Bo. To what extent had their battle with the Golden Horde reached? Was it possible that they had failed and even attracted the army of the Golden Horde? If that was the case, then Baiming and even Walla and Yeshen would take the opportunity to attack. As for North Korea, they had always been a vassal state of Baiming. The Li dynasty there had always followed the Great Ming dynasty. This time, they saw their ships at sea again. They were in existence that could cut off their supply line at any time. If Baiming really attacked Shicheng, how could they stand by and watch? At that time, they would have one more enemy. On the Japanese Empire's side, the Security Bureau had already sent news that the Emperor was preparing to attract more people and forces to fight against the general. Once the two sides fought, no matter who won in the end, Yang Chendong would take the opportunity to intervene. Otherwise, once either side completely controlled the place, it would be a big obstacle for him to send troops to the Japanese Empire in the future. There was also the Siam and Awol dynasty around the Golden Horde dynasty. Would they watch him attack the Golden Horde dynasty? If the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold. They would not do this. How to restrict them and not let them play a role in this war was also a problem that needed to be seriously considered. After summing up all these things, Yang Chendong suddenly found that his strength was still too weak. Once several places fought at the same time, it was conceivable that the military force would be stretched thin. It was even possible to lose land. It seems that I need to make a good plan, Yang Chendong said to himself. He picked up the pen and paper on the table and began to write the preparations that needed to be done. 7 days later, seventh sister Yang Duo's wedding. Yang Chendong, as the only relative in Chichen City, naturally had to show up. After some excitement, the next day, Yang Chendong issued the first order to prepare for the war. The formation of the First Land Army. The commander was Lung Song. His rank was also promoted from colonel to major general. This order, which was late for nearly a year, made Lung Song's eyes fill with tears. During this period, he was confused, and even decadent, but in the end he survived. Now that his dream had finally come true, he found that he wasn't that excited. On the contrary, a strong fighting spirit flowed in his heart. He wanted to take advantage of the upcoming battle to prepare for it. This time, he had to show off his might. The soldiers who were ready to enter the First Land Army began to report from all over the country, enriching the team and making it stronger. Soon after, the second order was issued. 200,000 people and 30,000 educated young people were selected to be ready to move at any time. In order to encourage everyone's enthusiasm, once they moved, each person would be given 20 mu of grain field, or 100 taels of silver. They could choose one of the suitable jobs. When the army and people were ready, Yang Chendong sent another telegram to the first city, asking the city lord, Yumian, to arrange 50,000 Mongolian people to be ready to move at any time. He also informed Tiger's Mane to let the 1st Cavalry Division prepare for battle. If they wanted to become the strongest cavalry in the world, they needed to constantly kill. Since there were no big battles around the first city, they would be arranged to participate in the battle in the Phnom Penh dynasty. Next, there were 2 provinces in Vietnam and Laos. The 2 governors also received the preparation of 30,000 people to come and move at any time. Young Chendong was preparing for the occupation after defeating the Phnom Penh dynasty. With the participation of 340,000 people, it would play a great role in winning the people's hearts and ruling this place. The orders were issued one by one. After Yang Chendong participated in the opening ceremony of the Anti-Corruption Department and the Ministry of Public Security, he ushered in the Spring Festival of 1454 AD. He accompanied his wives to celebrate the Spring Festival happily. On the 7th day of the Spring Festival, he took the ship of the new Army's 4th Division from Chien City straight to Lao Province. At this time, it had been more than 3 months since Yang Chendong came to Chien City. This time he raised his sword high again and slashed toward the Phnom Penh dynasty. Yang Chendong met Yuan Shaochen again in Mahase, a city in the southeast of Lao Province. This time, it had been more than a year since they parted. After more than a year of experience, Yuan Shaochen was more capable and mature. The sense of immaturity on his body had faded a lot, and was replaced by a more mature temperament. As soon as he saw Yang Chendong, he gave a standard military salute. "Sixth young master, you've worked hard." "You've worked hard too." Yang Chendong smiled and returned the salute. He patted Yuan Shaochen on the shoulder. "How is it? Are you used to living and working here?" "It's okay. At first, I felt that the burden on my shoulders was a little heavy. I was out of breath for a while, but now I'm used to it." Yuan Shaochen smiled and asked Yang Chendong to sit on the first seat. Then he also chose a seat next to him. Chapter 9:11. People always have to grow. This is a process, and it is also a wealth. If you accumulate it well, you will benefit a lifetime. All the data has shown that the construction and work in Lao Province is very good. You, as the governor, should be the first to contribute. After Yang Chendong sat down, he praised Yuan Shaochen for a while. This was not a casual praise from Yang Chendong, nor was it a routine praise. From the data, from the feedback of the Security Bureau and the CIA, the work in Lao Province was indeed very smooth. Compared to Vietnam Province, which had been conquered 4 months ago, Laos had already surpassed them in many aspects. Judging from this point alone, Yuan Shaochen had indeed done a good job. In fact, he could even be used as the basis for the Analects of Confucius. "Thank you, sixth young master, for the praise. We have done far enough. There are still more things to do." Yuan Shaochen said modestly. "Haha, okay, you did a good job. I am very happy. Xiaoyu is also very happy. You don't know, since you left Chichen City, Xiaoyu has sent me countless telegrams. She is very worried about you, and she is very concerned about you. The facts also proved that I was not wrong. You did a good job. Her worries were unnecessary." Ah. Seeing that Yang Chendong was in a good mood, Yuan Shaochen just smiled. Although he and Yuan Xiaoyu were brother and sister, and their relationship had always been very good, it would not be long before they became master and servant. This was something that had to be clarified first. Father and son, there was the etiquette between a ruler and a minister, and then there was the relationship between father and son. Knowing that Yuan Shaochen had a sense of propriety and would not say anything on sensitive issues, Yang Chendong changed the topic. "Tell me, how is the situation here now? It has been more than a year since the last battle. Did anyone forget the pain and want to jump up?" "Yes. The sixth young master is really good at predicting things. Some people really don't learn from their mistakes. They are indeed jumping up and down." Yuan Shaochen smiled. Then he began to report on the situation in Southeast Asia. More than a year ago, the mercenaries found a suitable excuse to start a war with the Salangan family. They fought all the way to Suing City, the hinterland of the Golden Rim dynasty. Boromir had no choice but to lower his noble head and take the initiative to reconcile. The war had brought peace to Laos, and over the past year, Laos had been developing rapidly. The economy had recovered and was even better than before, and the standard of living of the people was also improving day by day. As Lao Province became more powerful, the commoners lived better lives, and it attracted more and more commoners from nearby countries to migrate to Lao Province. This was a good thing for Luan Xiaoqian, who was in urgent need of manpower, but it was a headache for the surrounding countries. They all sent out envoys to protest. In their words, Laos was using another method to encroach on their interests. Once there were no commoners in the country, what could they do? At that time, the country would no longer be a country. Speaking up to here, Luan Xiaoqian smiled. For this matter, we have suffered a lot from them. However, with the idea that strength is the right to speak, we in Yunnan province did not pay attention to them. Instead, we adopted the method left behind by the sixth young master. We deliberately strengthened the close relationship with the Siam dynasty and the Awad dynasty. We also selectively closed some of the entrances to the two neighboring countries and gave them more preferential policies in commercial cooperation. On the other hand, we continued to impose the previous high-pressure policy on the Golden Rim dynasty. In this way, under the unfair treatment, the Golden Rim dynasty could not sit still. Wave after wave of envoys were sent over. After their protests were ineffective, they blamed their allies, the Siam dynasty and the Awad dynasty, according to our plan. We learned from various channels that the so-called alliance of the three countries has entered a period of ice. They can no longer be the same as before. Good, this method of domination is beautiful, and the method of disintegration is also very good. Xiaoqian, then you estimate that if we start now, will the alliance of the three countries still unite to fight against our army? Yang Chendong laughed with satisfaction. Now it seemed that leaving Luan Xiaoqian to preside over the overall situation in Laos was indeed very correct. Sixth young master, are we going to start? At this time, Luan Xiaoqian was also excited, and his whole body was tense. Well, this time I secretly came here for this matter. But the premise is that once we start against the Golden Rim dynasty, will Siam and Awad send troops? How many troops will they send? And whether their attitude will be firm? We must figure this out in advance. Yang Chendong nodded. Luan Xiaoqian was someone he trusted. Naturally, there was nothing that he could not tell him. What's more, if he wanted to win this war, he must get Luan Xiaoqian's full support. After telling the truth, Luan Xiaoqian became more excited. Good, it's time to fight. Sixth young master, you don't know, since we started to discriminate, the Golden Rim dynasty has also taken a lot of corresponding measures, such as increasing the military control at the border, strictly checking the people who want to migrate, strictly inspecting the caravans sent by us, and even imposing heavy taxes, etc. Sigh. Luan Xiaoqian sighed and said, because of this matter, many businessmen have complained to the provincial government. But considering that we are still focusing on economic development and urban construction, and have no intention of fighting, we can only endure this silently. Now it's good, we can finally teach them a lesson. Looking at Luan Xiaoqian's emotional voice, Yang Chendong just smiled. As the governor of a province, while receiving respect and glory, there were also some pressures that needed to be shouldered. Only by enduring all these would one be considered to have truly matured. Only then could one be considered to have achieved the fruits of one's cultivation, and be entrusted with heavy responsibilities in the future. After a simple complaint, Luan Xiaoqian spoke about the various possibilities that he thought would happen once it happened. Although the relationship between the three countries is not as good as before because of our dominance, the relationship between the three countries in the alliance is not as good as before. But after all, if the lips are gone, the teeth will feel cold. Even if they are planning for themselves, they will not watch the Golden Rim dynasty be captured by us. They should still send troops. Yang Chendong understood this point. After all, the existence of the three countries' alliance was to ensure their most basic interests, to ensure that they had a certain power to fight back in the face of more powerful mercenaries. Now that someone had touched one of them, it was tantamount to touching their foundation. What if we can end the battle quickly? Since there was already animosity in his heart, how to make full use of this was a problem that Yang Chendong had to consider. For example, if Sui Xiong suddenly took action and quickly eliminated the Goldbine dynasty, the war would be over by the time Siam and Ava reacted and gathered their forces. He did not believe that the two countries would take the initiative to start a war with the mercenaries. Fast? How fast? Luan Xiaoqian instantly understood the meaning of Yang Chendong's words, and immediately looked curious. Solve it within 1 to 2 months. What do you think? Yang Qindong leaned back in his chair and said unhurriedly. 1 to 2 months? Really? Hearing that the Golden Rim dynasty could be taken down in such a short time, Yuan Shaoqian was also shocked and thought that it was impossible. After all, it was a country with a large territory and enough troops and combat power to protect itself. But this was said by Yang Qindong, and Yuan Shaoqian had to believe it. As soon as the words came out, Yuan Shaoqian regretted it and looked embarrassed. What was he doing just now? Was he questioning the sixth young master? Well, don't have any pressure. It's normal for you to have such thoughts. Presumably not only you but everyone will think so. In that case, if we really solve the problem of the Golden Rim dynasty in a short time, they won't think of it. This will create enough favorable conditions for our next work, right? Yang Qindong said with a look of understanding. Yang Qindong knew that if he said that he could solve the problem of the Golden Rim dynasty in 1 to 2 months, everyone would think that he was exaggerating. But such things had happened in history. For example, in the Gulf War of later generations, the powerful Western countries only took 1 month and 11 days to solve the war. At that time the whole world was shocked. Yes, that Western country had everything that a modern army had. But in contrast, didn't the mercenaries have many advantages today? They had the world's strongest cavalry that had been in war on the Mongolian grassland for a long time. At sea, they had the world's fastest warships and the best artillery. With both sea and land, if they were well prepared, it was possible to solve the entire Golden Rim dynasty in a very short time. As long as the Golden Rim dynasty was annexed, the next Siam dynasty and Awad dynasty would be like a half-wrapped dumpling. They could be controlled however they wanted. In that case, controlling the 5 Southeast Asian countries bordering the Great Ming dynasty would become a reality. Once this place was connected and managed for a period of time, this place would become another Crimson City, a primordial city, and a new base. At that time, whether it was marching to other Southeast Asian countries in the south, attacking the countries on the sea, or to deter Beiming, or even to the north, it would be possible. Only in this way could he kill without worrying about the safety of his backyard. The idea was beautiful, but there were also many issues to consider when it came to actual operation. For example, the migration of personnel, controlling the entire Golden Rim dynasty, and building it faster were the top priorities. Chapter 9:12. What Yang Qindong wanted was a Phnom Penh dynasty that could become his logistics base, not a Phnom Penh dynasty that was devastated, scarred, and could even have civil strife at any time. If this was the case, it was better not to occupy it, so as not to spend a lot of energy on it. That would not be worth the loss. Today's mercenaries were like the German army during World War II. They had strong military strength and financial support in the early stages of the war. However, after fighting one battle after another, he was ultimately defeated. One of the most fundamental reasons was that they couldn't see their own strength at all. They thought they were the best in the world, but they didn't know that strong combat power was not equal to strong ruling and management ability. Yang Qindong never thought of becoming a fat man in one bite. What he wanted was how to win wars quickly and steadily without shaking the foundation. For this reason, he set a goal for himself. That was, he would never spend too much time and energy in any war. If he could fight, he would fight. If he couldn't fight, he would withdraw immediately. Otherwise, once he fell into the quagmire of war, he might not be able to extricate himself. Once there was a problem in a certain link, it was not a matter of whether he could win others, but whether he could survive or not. Having a broader vision and a worldview beyond the world was also a major advantage of Yang Qindong. It was something that others could not compare to. Yes, if we can really solve the problem of the Phnom Penh dynasty in 1 or 2 months, then we can really catch them off guard and make them unable to send troops to help. In this way, I will do it. I will try to delay the time for Siam and Awa to send troops. After understanding Yang Qindong's intention, Yuan Shaoqian promised. Not only that, Laos and Yunnan province need to provide 30,000 people to the Phnom Penh dynasty. There must be a certain proportion of skilled workers among these people. After the war, it means that there will be reconstruction. This work is also very important. What Yang Chendong wanted was not only the full support of Yuan Shaoqian, but also the help of people and talents. Of course, the money for the reconstruction of the Phnom Penh dynasty after the disaster will be provided by Chichen City. Laos doesn't have to worry about this. Oh, that shouldn't be a problem. Although Lao province had only been established for a short period of time, it had the support of Chichen City. There were still many technical talents. When the time came, it should not be a problem to allocate about 5,000 people. Yuan Shaoqian agreed. Yang Chendong was gratified and said, "Time is tight. I can't reveal that I'm here for the time being. You have to do some work yourself. You also need to inform the governor of Vietnam, Songzhi. These are all my orders. You just need to convey them." "Okay, sixth young master, I know what to do." Yuan Shaoqian nodded again. He knew that if war broke out, it would have a huge impact on the economic development of Lao province, but he had to follow the overall situation. Even in the long run, it was worth it to lose something now. One was his own people, and the other could become a bomb at any time. In the following time, Yang Chendong and Yuan Shaoqian talked for half a day in the small courtyard, exchanging opinions on some things. Yang Chendong also proposed a general direction of the development of things. As for the details, it was up to Yuan Xiaoli to grasp. The next day, Yuan Shaoqian left Mahase City. To the outside world, this was just an ordinary inspection, and it did not attract the attention of any forces. However, when he left, only he himself knew what sort of heavy responsibility he was shouldering. When he thought of the departure, Yang Chendong only gave him half a month to prepare. He felt great pressure, but at the same time, he was excited. Once the Phnom Penh dynasty became one of the mercenary forces, it could be imagined that the development of Lao province would enter the fast lane, and the speed of development would be rapid. Half a month to prepare, this was not only the time limit Yang Chendong gave Yuan Shaoqian, but also the deadline he gave to the participating forces. As early as 10 days ago, the first city on the grassland received a telegram. 48 hours later, the fully prepared 1st Cavalry Division left the first city area. They traveled at night from the new Ergon Dusi area to the sea town, where a large number of transport ships were waiting for them. The 1st Cavalry Division came and went like a shadow. They did not even have a fixed training place. Everything was based on actual combat. Wherever they appeared, there would often be a war. Even if such an army suddenly disappeared on the grassland, no one would know and notice. This increased the stealth of the operation. When the various forces knew that the 1st Cavalry Division appeared in Southeast Asia and showed their powerful side to the Phnom Penh dynasty, it was already a matter of the future. Not only was the 1st Cavalry Division in action, but the 1st Sea Army of the Navy was also in action. Commander Gao Xiong gave the task of dealing with the Phnom Penh dynasty to Long Yin Tian, the commander of the 3rd Division. Yang Chendong had personally promoted this person from an acting regiment commander to the position of a division commander. This time it was time for him to perform and repay Yang Chendong. Advancing on both land and sea could greatly damage the Phnom Penh dynasty and shorten the time to occupy this place. In addition, he personally led more than 8,000 soldiers of the 4th Division of the 1st Sea Army, plus 8,000 soldiers of 20 auxiliary battalions. He seemed to have seen the scene of the 5-star flag being placed all over the Phnom Penh dynasty. After Yuan Shaoqian returned to Wanxiang City, where the provincial government was located, he immediately made a series of arrangements. Some of them were for the province, some were for the province, some were for the province, some were for the economy, some were for the civil affairs, and some were for the military. 2 days later, Yuan Shaoqian attended a regular meeting at the Lao Commerce Bureau and gave a speech. In view of the recent friendly relations with Siam and Ava, in order to deepen the relationship and cooperation between each other, the export point of goods was increased by 5%, and the price was lowered by 5%. The comparison of 5% between the two countries increased the interests of the merchants of the two countries by far more than 10%. It would only be more. When the news came out, the merchants of the two countries were jubilant, and the major forces behind those merchants were also very happy. Since ancient times, officials and merchants were closely related. Yuan Shaoqian saw through this and made this move. With this agreement, It could be greatly guaranteed that once the Phnom Penh dynasty was attacked, the reinforcements of Siam and Ava would slow down. After all, once they chose to fight with the mercenaries, it would inevitably affect the trade and the income and living standards of those in power. 3 days later, Luan Shaoqian represented the Lao government to express great dissatisfaction with the Phnom Penh dynasty's blockade of the border. 2 days later, the Lao army in the province began to move frequently. Under the leadership of General He Guang, they quickly moved to the border area of the province and began to gather a large amount of food. When there was a change in the military, it was often the first to attract attention. The spies of Phnom Penh, Siam, and Ava and Lao also moved. However, what they did not understand was that the mercenaries stationed in Laos and Vietnam, the 2nd Division of the Cold Front, under Luo Pa, did not move at all. They were still training in the barracks. From time to time, they could see the army running and training outside the barracks. The Lao army was just a local army, so it was not scary. The 2nd Division of the mercenaries was the existence that could affect the hearts of the 3 countries. Therefore, after seeing this result, the 3 parties almost all had the same opinion. That was, the Lao army's movement was just to deter the Phnom Penh dynasty. They did not intend to really move. Of course, if the Lao army really moved, it was still uncertain whether they could defeat the Phnom Penh dynasty. 3 days after the decision was made, they thought that the Lao army's movement would stop. After all, there was nothing to see if there was only thunder and no rain. However, what they did not expect was that the Lao army did not stop the so-called deterrence movement. On the contrary, they sent troops to Shangding City. Both sides stationed troops on the border. It was a sign that a storm was brewing. Siam and Ava could no longer stand by and do nothing. They sent out envoys to mediate between the 2 countries. In their eyes, the best situation was for all sides to get along well with each other. Anyone who wanted to break this situation would be their enemy. The appearance of the messengers of the 2 countries seemed to ease the situation. At least, they did not see the Lao army sending troops. While everyone was relieved, the messengers of Siam and Ava found the messenger of the Phnom Penh dynasty. They expressed their concern about the current situation. Since the Lao army had restrained themselves from sending troops, should the Phnom Penh dynasty make a friendly gesture and withdraw some troops from the border between the 2 countries? The messenger of the Phnom Penh dynasty was calm about this matter. He already knew that it was only the Lao army that came. He did not care about this kind of army. Not to mention, according to their statistics, the number of troops that came was not even 10,000. On the contrary, the Phnom Penh dynasty stationed 50,000 troops at the border. Whether it was the comparison of numbers or the comparison of military strength, they seemed to have the advantage. Under such circumstances, how could they retreat easily? It doesn't matter. The Lao army just wants to show that they are the boss. There will be no war. This was the answer of the messenger of the Phnom Penh dynasty. For this answer, the messengers of Siam and Ava agreed. In fact, they were also in a difficult position. As allies, they had to advance and retreat together. However, establishing a good relationship with Laos, especially in terms of business, would allow them to earn more money. None of the losses seemed to be something that they could afford. Chapter 9:13. Fortunately, it was the Laos army that came this time, so there was nothing to worry about. In this way, while reminding the messengers of the Golden Border dynasty not to be careless, they also paid more attention to the mercenary army. In their view, as long as the trump card army did not move, the war would not break out. Even if there was an uncontrollable situation, it would only be a small-scale battle and would not affect the overall situation. Some people even thought that this was clearly a performance of Governor Luan Shaoqian's strong appearance. He just wanted to scare the Golden Border dynasty. When this opinion finally became a consensus, even the messengers in charge of mediation were not as enthusiastic as before. However, except for Luan Shaoqian and He Guang, no one else knew that Yang Qindong, known as the God of War, had arrived at Shangding City and was holding a military meeting there. It had been 15 days since Yang Qindong and Luan Shaoqian met. In other words, the war would start at any time. Today, Yang Qindong's sudden appearance in the city lord's mansion in Shangding City had really shocked He Guang's subordinates. However, their general He Guang's expression was calm. Obviously, he had already known about this matter. At the beginning of the mission, He Guang was also a group of people who were kept in the dark. Luan Shaoqian just told him to take 8,000 Lao's soldiers to Shangding City to scare the Golden Border Dynasty's troops there. He Guang himself did not reject this order. He also thought that it was very unsafe to be surrounded by foreign armies in the borderlands. Therefore, after receiving the mission, he set off. Along the way, he deliberately made a noise, as if he was afraid that others would not know about it. When they arrived at Dingxi City, He Guang saw Yang Qindong, who had arrived earlier than them. He turned pale with fright. He didn't understand why the sixth young master would be alarmed by such a simple display of force. But until he met him and received the mission, he realized that it was not a deterrence, but a real attack on the Golden Border Dynasty. He Guang was the general of the Lao army, and it would be difficult to hide anything from him. Therefore, Yang Qindong chose to meet him as soon as possible and told him his strategy, which was to steal the sky and change the sun. With the Lao's army as the base, the 4th Division of the Cold Front Army wore their clothes and pretended to be them. They appeared in Shangding City and quietly completed their pre-war arrangements. Of course, there was still some work to be done. For example, after the Laotian army entered the city, they would need to go back and forth. Only a small number of people would leave the city, while a large number of people would return to the city. This way, the Laotian army would be able to bring the entire army into the city. The soldiers who had already entered the city had to hide in the houses of the citizens to avoid detection from the spies of the other countries. Fortunately, the Golden Dynasty had stationed their troops outside Shangding City for a long time. Most of the people in the city had fled in fear. In addition, there had been a massacre in Shangding City before, so there were many empty houses. It was not a problem for more than 10,000 mercenaries to live in. The meeting officially began. In front of many officers, Yang Qindong announced that the army would leave the city at midnight and attack the Golden Bian army. According to Yang Qindong, this time, the 8,000 Laotian soldiers did not need to fight on the battlefield. They only needed to follow the army and look for prisoners in territory. When the news was announced, many Laotian officers breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, they looked at the unfamiliar officers in front of them with some suspicion. As far as they knew, the 6th young master led the 4th Division of the Cold Front Army this time, plus 20 auxiliary battalions, a total of more than 16,000 people. Among them, the main task of 20 auxiliary battalions was to capture captives on the battlefield. How could they really defeat 50,000 enemies on the opposite side with just one cold vanguard division? And take down Jiba City like a hot knife through butter? Or even take down the entire Golden Bian dynasty? Even if this division was powerful, it would be difficult for them to do that. Should they say that the 6th young master was confident or arrogant? The meeting went smoothly. With Yang Qindong there, almost everything was decided by him. The others had no chance to interrupt, let alone dare to question anything. In this way, they watched Yang Qindong announce the entire battle plan. I will reiterate one point. The main task of the auxiliary troops is to follow the main force of the 4th Division, provide them with ammunition, capture prisoners on the battlefield, and carry out simple battlefield rescue. The main task of the Laotian army is to receive and take care of the prisoners, receive the granaries and various warehouses in the cities we captured along the way, and do the necessary registration, and arrange for the people sent from other places to live in the Siam Pool. In this, I hope that everyone can perform well. If anyone dares to hide the trophies or be absent during the war, don't blame the military law for being merciless. These words were Yang Qindong's reminder to the Laotian army, because whether it was the Cold Front Army or the auxiliary troops, they were known for their strict military discipline. The Laotian army, on the other hand, was mostly made up of the original soldiers of the Kanglin Kingdom. Although they had undergone a certain restructuring, most of them were old and weak in the army, but this did not mean that they were really obedient. Yang Qindong did not want the soldiers to fight in the front line, but some people's selfishness caused problems in the rear. If that happened, he would inevitably have to find someone to punish. War was a matter of money, but at the same time, Plundering resources was also a considerable amount of wealth. After so many years, the Golden Bian dynasty had some wealth, which would play a huge role in the reconstruction of this place after the war. After the order was given, He Guang's expression became very ugly. He knew that the sixth young master did not trust the Laotian army, but he could not refute. He could only stand at attention and say, "Sixth young master, please rest assured, I will definitely rectify the military discipline. If something like this happens, you don't need to kill. I will kill them and send them to you personally." "Very good. I hope that this is not just for show, but for reality. Oh right, I forgot to remind you, I have sent a secret unit to watch everything in the dark. Whether you really did it or not, I will know very clearly." Yang Chendong nodded and did not forget to remind He Guang again. If he warned them to this extent, and they still showed their greedy nature, then he could only kill them as an example. He Guang and the officers of the auxiliary troops quickly left. Only Yang Chendong, Ling Daqiang, and the 4 regimental commanders were left in the room. The 5 of them stood in a line. Yang Chendong looked at them with a smile, and then helped them tidy up their uniforms. "You don't need to feel pressured. To be honest, your opponents this time are still very strong. Sixth young master, we are not afraid of strong opponents. We will be stronger than them." Ling Daqiang said confidently. "Yes, we will be stronger than them," the 4 regimental commanders said in unison. At the same time, their faces were filled with killing intent and confidence, as if their bodies were burning, and they were ready for a bloody battle on the battlefield. The 4 regimental commanders were the 1st regimental commander, Gao Xiang, the 2nd regimental commander, Yuan, the 3rd regimental commander, Lu Zheng, and the 4th regimental commander, Yi Fengxing. They had all been promoted step by step as soldiers, and that was how they became regimental commanders. The 4 of them had also entered the military department of Resin City Academy to further their studies. They were capable of wielding guns and killing people, and were also well-versed in all kinds of military books. This time, the formation of the First Army was a good opportunity for them, and they had all been promoted from battalion to regimental commanders. This time, it was time for them to perform well on the battlefield. As young as they were naturally filled with confidence, and with the most powerful firearms in the world in their hands, they naturally would not put ordinary enemies in their eyes. It was a good thing for an officer to have confidence and morale. Yang Chendong chuckled and said, "It is good that you have the confidence to win. However, I think you have misunderstood my meaning. This time, your opponents are not outsiders but your own people." "Our own people?" Including Ling Daqiang, the 5 soldiers were all puzzled. They didn't understand what this meant. Could it be that the 2nd division had also come? If that was the case, then they would be under a lot of pressure. The 2 ND Division's commander, Luo Pe, was second only to Lung Song and the others in the army. Everyone respected him. "Yes, our own people. They are a cavalry unit that I formed when I was in the grasslands. Many of them even have foreign faces. Of course they are all Han now, just like you all. That's right, they have a very resounding name, the world's first cavalry division. Haha. Don't say that this young master didn't warn you. Although they are using cavalry sabers, based on the speed of their war horses, they may not be inferior to you. You must be mentally prepared and not be outdone by others." Yang Chendong had a smile on his face when he thought about the news that the world's first cavalry division would arrive at Shangding City in the afternoon. He was looking forward to seeing who would perform better on the battlefield, Lung Feng or the cavalry. Hearing that it was cavalry, Ling Daqiang's expression became much more serious. Humans were naturally slower than cavalry, but fortunately they had brought enough bicycles for this trip, so it was not much of a difference. He immediately said, "We are not afraid of any competition. Every one of our soldiers has undergone arduous training and extremely difficult tests. We believe that we are outstanding enough." Yes, that is a good point. However, every one of the cavalry of the 1st Regiment has also undergone strict and even harsh tests before they were able to join the army. They have gone through countless trials of life and death before they were able to achieve their goals. They are not inferior to you in any way. Yang Chendong thought about the bloody battle with Tuachuo Buhua Dehan that lasted for a month. Now that they had undergone several months of arduous training, He believed that Tian Hu would bring him more surprises. Chapter 9:14. After giving them enough pressure, Yang Qinjiang turned and left, leaving Ling Daqiang and the other 4 commanders behind. Their expressions were not good, because on the table in front of them, there was an introduction about the 1st Cavalry Division. Oh my God, they are all people who participated in the Blood War. Their experience on the battlefield is not something we can compare to. The first commander, Gao Xiang, looked at the information seriously and said with a sigh, This opponent cannot be underestimated. The second commander, He Wan, frowned and said. The third commander, Lu Zheng, also said, That's right. In comparison, although the selection of our soldiers is extremely harsh, they do not have much actual combat experience. Don't be afraid. The fourth commander, Yi Xingfeng, saw that the 3 commanders were trying to diminish his own morale and boost the morale of others, so he said, We have the strongest guns in the world. This is something that no other army can compare to. This is our advantage. Well said. Ling Daqiang nodded at Yi Xingfeng. Although we have been cooped up in Crimson City for a long time, and do not have much actual combat experience, our usual drills are not a joke. The death rate of 3 out of 10,000 in actual combat practice is enough to prove everything. And now is the time to prove our strength. I originally thought that this battle would be too easy and boring. Now that we have such a strong competitor, it is time for us to perform well. We need to use our actions to tell the 6th young master that we, the Cold Front, will always be the strongest. Yes, we, the Cold Front, will always be the strongest. The 4 commanders were stirred up and said in unison. At this moment, every single one of them was exuding a strong fighting spirit. Yang Qindong walked out of the main hall, followed by Beta Persei, who looked like he wanted to say something. Okay, if you have something to say, just say it. When did you learn to stammer like a girl? Yang Qindong noticed the change in Beta Persei and laughed. Young master, I am worried. Will your words affect the morale of the 4th Division? If they are pressured too much or their morale is damaged, and they do not perform well, then it will be difficult for us to solve the problem of the Phnom Penh dynasty in 1 or 2 months with only 10,000 people. If this drags on, once Siam and Ava send troops, the situation will be bad. Beta Persei raised his head and looked seriously at Yang Qindong's back. It's okay, young master knows what to do. Besides, if the Cold Front can't even stand this little bit of pressure, then they are not worthy of their name. As for the result, we'll just have to wait and see. Yang Qindong laughed as he spoke. Only when there was competition would there be motivation. So what if he was Lung Feng? When it was time to carry the burden, he would carry it. To be honest, he had high hopes for the 1st Cavalry Division. He was looking forward to their perfect performance in this battle. The 1st Cavalry Division that Yang Qindong thought highly of had arrived at a forest outside Shangding City. After arriving here, Division Commander Tian, who ordered the whole army to dismount and rest. When the sky was completely dark, they would enter the city to meet the 6th young master. They were originally made up of the most elite cavalrymen. After a few months of training, the 3 regiments of 6,000 men were completed. After a long period of training, the 6,000 cavalrymen dismounted when they heard the order. The warriors leaned against the trees and closed their eyes to sleep. Tian Hu often said that an army that did not know how to use the time to rest was an unqualified army. A real soldier could use all the time to rest, even if they were in a hurry, in order to perform better in the upcoming battle. The division commander's order was carried out and carried out. Now that the order was given, except for the necessary scouts who were still wandering outside, the rest of the soldiers entered a state of rest. Tian Hu first patrolled the area and looked at the surrounding terrain. In his mind, he came up with all sorts of solutions in case of an emergency. Then he came to the bottom of a big tree. Here, his 3 captains were already waiting for him. The 1st Regimental Commander, Temu the 2nd Regimental Commander, Lu Duo, and the 3rd Regimental Commander, Hubo sat there with a bloody aura. This was caused by them killing too many people recently. It was worth mentioning here that the 3 regimental commanders of the 1st Cavalry Division, which Yang Qindong thought highly of, were all captives. Just this spirit alone was enough to make few people rival them. Division Commander. When Tianhu appeared, the 3 regimental commanders stood up together with a respectful expression. This was not only because they were regimental commanders and Tianhu was their commanding officer, but also because Tianhu had used his own strength to conquer them. During this period of time, with the first city and the embryonic North Desert City as the center point, they patrolled several times within 1,000 miles of the surrounding area. Whenever they encountered a patrolling cavalry from a hostile force, they would kill them without hesitation. Among them, Tianhu had killed the most enemies. His dual sabers were like an art. Once he killed the enemy, it was dazzling and impossible for the enemy to guard against. In the grassland there was a saying of the 3 tigers. Tiger's Mane, Iron Tiger, and Tianhu were listed as the 3 tigers by the Heavenly Khan's side. This meant that they were the most powerful and invincible existences. To be listed as one of the 3 tigers, Tianhu was naturally very happy. However, he also knew that this was just a saying among the people, and was not recognized by Yang Qindong. In his eyes, it was extremely important to get the recognition of the 6th young master. Therefore, after receiving the order this time, he made up his mind to perform well, and let the 6th young master see his ability. He wanted to let the 6th young master know that it was a right decision to hand over the 1st Cavalry Division to him. Take a seat, Tianhu said casually. Usually he was still very approachable. Only on the battlefield would he become a butcher, a killing tool. If someone violated the military law at that time and fell into his hands, they would definitely suffer a fate worse than death. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the battle plan, so I'll only say one thing. This is the first chance for us, the 1st Cavalry Division, to show off in front of the 6th young master. I don't want to see anyone holding us back. In short, once we're on the battlefield, charge forward with all your might and kill with all your might. We'll definitely get the credit. Tianhu's expression was calm, but he was also very serious as he spoke. This was to set the tone for this battle. The 3 captains all nodded in agreement. However, the 1st commander, Temur, expressed his opinion. Commander, I heard that our competitor is the 4th Division of the Cold Front. They are all equipped with firearms. Although they don't have war horses, they have bicycles that can move freely and they don't need to eat food. I'm afraid that their speed won't be too slow. Firearms are powerful, but charging on the battlefield requires time to aim and preparation. Every soldier has to bring a large amount of ammunition with them. This will definitely slow them down. The 2nd commander, Lu Duo, said without a change in expression. He was clearly very confident. Commander Lu is right. We have the fastest speed on land. No one will be faster than us. Huboer agreed. Although they were all surrendered generals, Huboer's surrender was still out of everyone's expectations. This person was originally from the Tatar faction. He had seen the army being defeated by the mercenaries with his own eyes. No one knew if he really wanted to take revenge. Because of this, someone had reminded Tianhu that this person could be used. However, he must not give him any real power. He must not be allowed to become a commander. Otherwise, if something happened, it would be a huge problem. Before Yang Qindong left, he had specifically instructed that Tianhu could make decisions for the 1st Cavalry Division. As long as their fighting strength increased and they could win battles, they could ignore the opinions of others. However, in the face of such a huge problem, Tianhu still reported to the new commander, Tiger's Man, and the deputy commander, Shibi. After Yang Qindong left the grasslands, the number 1 person in the military was undoubtedly Tiger's Man. Whether it was seniority, contributions, or influence in the military, no one could surpass him. In addition, he was the only one with the rank of Major General among them, so it was reasonable to report to him if there was anything to report. When Tianhu reported that Huboer was going to be the commander of the 3rd Cavalry Division, Tiger's Man only asked him one thing. If you feel that he's sincerely working for the mercenaries, you can control him and use him. No problem. Although he's the commander of the 3rd Cavalry Division, most of our brothers are here for the war god and the Khan. He can't do anything alone. If he dares to betray us, I'll make him regret ever being born. However, he's still a surrendered general, and a newly surrendered one at that. If he's given such a huge responsibility now, what should I say? I'm also a surrendered general. Deputy Commander Shibi finally opened his mouth to speak. Tian, who stood at attention when he heard this joke. He knew what to do. Not long after, Hubo was appointed as the third commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Back then, when he received this mission, even a man like Hubo had cried. He did not expect the mercenaries to trust him so much. Even if he were to throw 100 jin of meat here, it would not be a big deal. Of course, after receiving this appointment, Hubo made a request. He wanted to be the vanguard when the mercenaries attacked Yeshen. He wanted to take revenge for Tuachuo Buhua. If Hubo didn't make this request, Tian Hu might have been suspicious. However, because of this request, he was relieved and agreed to it in front of Hubo. Hence, Hubo could be considered a mid-level officer in the mercenaries. Alright, everyone should have this kind of confidence. As for the first commander's worries, we need to take them seriously. I've thought about this problem too. We need to make use of our strengths and use our speed to our advantage. If we encounter a city on the way, we don't need to force our way in. Instead, we need to go around it and clear out the surroundings. This way, we won't be tied down by the city and can make use of our advantage, Tian Hu said. Chapter 9:15. Being the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division was not just about bravery. Back then, Yang Chendong had chosen Tian Hu out of everyone else because Tian Hu had studied in the academy and had a good understanding of the art of war. Now it seemed that this person was indeed good at leading troops into battle. The four of them quickly reached a consensus and entered the city under the moonlight when it was dark. At this moment, Shangding City was already under martial law and curfew was imposed at night. There was a rule that no one was allowed to go out after dark, or they would be punished for collaborating with the enemy. Therefore, even the people living in Shangding City could only hear the sound of horses on the ground, but they had no idea how many troops were outside. Several secret agents of the Golden Bian dynasty felt that something was wrong, so they sneaked out of their homes and wanted to spread the news. However, as soon as they went out on the street, they were caught by the security bureau who had been waiting for a long time, and they were all captured alive. The news that the army was gathering and was about to launch an attack was tightly covered up. In the main hall of the Castellan mansion, Yang Chendong met the officers of the 1st Cavalry Division who came from the grassland. As soon as they appeared in the hall, a murderous aura unconsciously filled the air, which made Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 4th Cold Front Division, and the regimental commanders under him feel refreshed, and they blurted out unconsciously, "What a strong murderous aura. This must be an army that has gone through countless tests on the battlefield. Our opponents are quite strong. We are under pressure." Haha, don't be afraid. The greater the pressure, the greater the motivation. Although the officers were talking in private, Yang Chendong still saw their performance. He coughed softly and said, "I called you here today to let you meet each other and get to know each other. When you need to be united on the battlefield, you must be united, but when you need to compete, you must compete. Remember, war is not a treat. You must show your true ability. I am waiting to see your performance and give you credit." Yes. Everyone nodded at Yang Chendong in unison. "Well, there is one thing I want to tell you in advance. I have promised the governor of Laos, Luan Shaochen, that we will take down the Phnom Penh dynasty in 1 to 2 months. You have to work hard and don't let me break my promise." With a chuckle, Yang Chendong set the date for the war. None of the officers had any doubts about this, as if this was a very reasonable request. On the other hand, General He Guang, who was fortunate enough to be a part of this, had a face full of shock. From the moment Tian Hu walked into the hall with the 3 officers, he felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness. Perhaps it was because the murderous aura of these people was too strong. He couldn't figure out where the 6th young master got these killing machines from. They gave him the feeling that they were a scabbard that could be unsheathed at any time, making him feel suffocated. However, that pressure was not as great as the pressure that Yang Chendong's words gave him. How could it be possible to destroy the Phnom Penh dynasty in 1 to 2 months? No wonder He Guang had such an idea. Even if the Lao's army was fully prepared, it would take at least 2 to 3 years to finish the war. The Phnom Penh dynasty was a country with an army of 250,000 and a navy of 50,000. How could it be possible to destroy the Phnom Penh dynasty in such a short time with only 10,000 people? No matter how many doubts He Guang had, the meeting still went on as usual. The provisions, weapons, and other things you need are all in the city's warehouse. In a while you can send troops to get them. Take as much as you can because once the war starts, our logistics won't be able to supply as fast as your attack. At that time, you can only snatch everything you need from the enemy's hands. It was obvious that he meant to rob. Hearing this, the officers of the 4th Division of the Cold Front and the 1st Cavalry Division were extremely excited. If they could rob the land they occupied at Wu while fighting, then their last doubt would be solved. Feeling the excitement of these officers, Yang Chendong just smiled and didn't say anything. He didn't even ask them to not hurt the civilians. The Phnom Penh dynasty was inseparable from the Han people in terms of historical origin. However, in recent years, the Han people were regarded as slaves and as thorns in their flesh. Just this blockade, the Security Bureau had already received news that countless Han people were killed by the Phnom Penh dynasty. Yang Chendong naturally wouldn't be polite to such a people. He never thought that he had a big heart, nor did he think that repaying evil with good was the right thing to do. If that was the case, then how should he repay the virtuous people? Repaying kindness with evil? As for whether or not the Han would suffer losses in this battle, this was something that could not be avoided. However, as long as the Han people were smart enough to declare that they were Han people, no matter if it was the Lung Feng, the mercenaries, or the local forces like He Guang's Lao army, they would not dare to kill the Han people. Otherwise, if they were found guilty, they would be severely punished and their futures would be cut off, or even their lives. There was less than an hour before midnight, but a quarter of the items in the warehouse were already gone. Beta Persei had experience in managing logistics, so this time he also helped to check on the situation. When he saw that there were still so many war supplies left in the warehouse, he reported the matter to Chendong. Young Master, the 4th Division of the Cold Front and the 1st Cavalry Division only took 5 days of rations, and most of the heavy equipment is also piled in the warehouse. It seems that they want to use the war to support the war. After listening, Yang Chendong analyzed the thoughts of these officers. This was also good. With less heavy items, they could maximize their speed. This also made Yang Chendong very curious. He was looking forward to seeing the excellent performance of these 2 elite units. The supplies were distributed to the soldiers one by one, and then everyone began to check their weapons and equipment an hour before the war to make the final preparations. The guns were wiped again and again, and the horses were also fed, which would be more conducive to the horses' speed. Soon it was almost midnight. Let's go. After the order was given, the east and west gates of Shangding City were immediately opened, and then an army of 8,400 rode out of the city on bicycles, while an army of 6,000 rode out quietly on horses. They avoided the south gate, which was the closest to the enemy. When they all left Shangding City from the east and west, the sound of iron horses galloping on the ground spread out. 1 man and 2 horses, a total of 12,000 horses, like a dragon entering the sea, went straight to the army of Phnom Penh dynasty. They moved so fast. Everyone, speed up. Feeling the tremors from the earth, the commander of the 4th Division, Ling Daqiang, also shouted loudly. Then more than 8,000 bicycles rushed to the first blockade line 10 miles away from Shangding City under the moonlight. When it came to short distance marching on a plain, no one would be a match for the cavalry. What's more, which soldier of the 1st Cavalry Division was not a master of horsemanship? They leaned lightly on the horses to reduce wind resistance, and quickly went to the first blockade line of the Phnom Penh dynasty. This blockade line had been in place for nearly half a year. In the beginning, they were still nervous for a while, afraid that the mercenaries would suddenly kill them. But as the days passed and nothing happened, everyone unconsciously relaxed their vigilance. Just like tonight, most of the soldiers of the Phnom Penh dynasty were still asleep. All of a sudden, they felt the earth tremble. Those who were highly alert and sleepy crawled out of their beds. However, most of the soldiers were still lying in their blankets. It was the end of winter and the beginning of spring, so the temperature outside their blankets was still very cold. The 1st Regiment on the left, the 2nd Regiment on the right, and the 3rd Regiment at the back. Charge! Division Commander Tian, who took the lead. Seeing that the enemy camp with torches was less than 2 miles away, he issued the slogan to charge and kill the enemy. After the order was issued, the 1st Cavalry Division quickly changed the formation. The cavalry warriors of the 1st and 2nd Regiment also held a sword in one hand and a shield in the other to prevent the enemy's long-distance bow and arrow counterattack. The distance of 2 miles passed quickly. When they were 100 meters away from the enemy's bows and arrows were shot, but only sporadic crossbows. For the cavalry warriors who were used to Mongolian bows, such arrows were no different from scratching an itch. They either blocked with shields or slashed with swords. Soon they rushed to the top of the formation. Then the horses galloped and slashed. One by one, the Phnom Penh soldiers who had no time to react were cut down to the ground. Nearly 500 Phnom Penh soldiers who were responsible for night duty were killed in just one encounter. When the cavalry warriors rushed to the enemy camp and found that most of the enemy's tents were still motionless, the 1st and 2nd Regiments calmly issued the order to throw long hooks and pull the tents. The so-called throwing long hooks and pulling the tents meant that the cavalry threw out long hooks one by one and hung them on the 4 corners of the tents. Then, groups of horses ran in different directions, forcibly tearing the tents apart at the fastest speed. The enemy in the tents was exposed to them without reservation. The cavalry, who had been trained and practiced many times, was in groups of 4. Soon, the tents were forcibly uprooted one by one. Countless Phnom Penh soldiers were exposed under the moonlight. Most of them were not even properly dressed, let alone holding any weapons in their hands. This was a one-sided massacre. It was a passive battle that no one had prepared for. The 5,000 soldiers of the Phnom Penh dynasty in the 1st blockade line were all killed in less than half an hour. Not a single one was left alive. Chapter 9:16. During this period of time, the 3rd Regiment did not remain idle. With their regiment commander Hu Bo-er as their leader, they charged towards the right camp. Following the example, the 5,000 enemy troops there were quickly wiped out. If not for the fact that Hu Bo-er had noticed that the 4th Regiment of the Lung Fong Regiment had arrived and was in a hurry to leave, they would not have been able to kill so few of them. "All right, the brothers of Lung Fong are here. Let's retreat." Hu Bo-er blew a loud whistle, and the 2,000 cavalrymen obeyed the order. Just like when they appeared, they left as quickly as they came, without any hesitation. In less than 3 minutes, the vanguard regiment of the 4th Regiment, Gao Xiang, had arrived on the battlefield. When he saw that the ground was littered with the corpses of the enemy and the gold-rimmed soldiers who were squatting on the ground and trembling in fear, he did not feel any excitement in the face of victory. Instead, he cursed angrily, King World's 1st Cavalry Division, at least leave 2 people for us to kill. The 1st blockade was broken like a piece of paper. Tian, who was not satisfied with the current situation. His goal was simple. He wanted to use a night's time to break through the 5 blockades. When the gates opened in the morning, he wanted to kill his way into the city. This was using speed to fight speed. Taking advantage of the fact that the enemy did not have time to react, he wanted to kill his way into the city. This was a bold idea that would exceed everyone's expectations. However, this was also a feasible strategy. Taking advantage of the enemy's lack of defense, the cavalrymen could rely on their speed to accomplish this. However, the prerequisite for all of this was that the 1st Cavalry Division could not afford to slack off or be obstructed in the slightest. After wiping out the enemy's first line of defense, Tian Hu's confidence was greatly boosted. He immediately proposed the second plan of attack. The next line of defense would no longer be attacked by divisions, but by regiments. The second line of defense would be left to the 1st Cavalry Regiment, while the 2nd and 3rd Cavalry Regiments would charge forward without stopping. The 2nd Cavalry Regiment would attack the 3rd line of defense, while the 3rd Cavalry Regiment would attack the 4th line of defense. The cycle would repeat, and the 5th line of defense would be left to the 1st Cavalry Regiment, who had just arrived. This way, they could use the least amount of time to break through the enemy's blockade line one by one, and achieve the strategic goal of entering Jiba City at dawn. Before the operation, the 3 regimental commanders and the battalion commanders already knew the specifics of the second plan. The division commander gave the order, and the 3 regiments immediately rushed forward at full speed. The facts had already proven that there were only 5,000 people on their side. With just a regiment of 2,000 cavalry, it was very likely that they would be able to wipe them out. The world's 1st Cavalry Division was advancing at an unimaginable speed. Compared to them, the 4 divisions of the Cold Front were slower. However, they were only slightly slower than the cavalry. After all, they mainly relied on firearms, and the weight of the supplies they carried was higher than that of the cavalry. However, they were almost running all the way without any intention of stopping. It was obvious that the cavalry division had helped them set up the first blockade. This made the soldiers of the 4th Division feel very humiliated. They swore that they would repay this humiliation by helping the cavalry division to set up a blockade. Only then could they be considered to be on par with the cavalry division. In order to achieve this goal, the commander of the 4th Regiment, Ling Daqiang, kept urging the Cold Front to speed up again and again. The wheels under everyone's feet were pushed to the limit. However, when they had just taken down the 2nd blockade line of the Goldenbian dynasty, the scouts had already reported that the cavalry division had taken down the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th blockade lines in the west. The 4th blockade line was almost destroyed, and the cavalry regiment was heading towards the 5th blockade line. Damn, they divided their forces. The 1st Regiment commander, Zhang Xiang, was shocked. They only used 6,000 people in total, and they dared to divide their forces like this. They are really brave. The 2nd Regiment commander, Yuan, praised sincerely. As expected of the 1st Cavalry Division, this time, our 4th Regiment has a worthy opponent. The 3rd Regiment commander, Lu Zheng, said. In the end, it was the 4th Regiment commander, Yi Xingfeng, who suggested, "Commander, let's divide our forces too. It has been proven that the soldiers of the Goldenbian dynasty are too weak. We didn't use any firearms at all. We easily broke the 2nd blockade line with our long swords. Yes, divide our forces. We will divide our forces too. Everyone, don't be discouraged. Although our performance in the first battle was not as good as the 1st Cavalry Division, we will definitely get back at them in the future. Because we are the most elite cold front in the world. No one can be stronger than us." Ling Daqiang encouraged the soldiers with his words. However, he didn't notice that he was calling them the 1st Cavalry Division before, but now he was calling them the 1st Cavalry Division. The change in the title alone was enough to show his respect and recognition for the 1st Cavalry Division. Whether it was the 1st Cavalry Division or the 4th Cold Front Division, they were like 2 flying arrows that pierced into the army of the Goldenbian dynasty. They broke the enemy's defenses again and again with lightning speed. Except for the 1st blockade line, there was a unit on night duty. There were only a few dozen soldiers on duty at the back lines. Facing the world's strongest army, they were defeated before they could even form a counterattack. The front line kept winning, but the 8,000 auxiliary soldiers and 8,000 Laotian soldiers behind suffered. One of them followed the 4th Cold Front Division, while the other followed the 1st Cavalry Division. Wherever they went, there were dead bodies of the enemy. There were not even many wounded soldiers. A large amount of food and weapons were thrown on the ground for the soldiers to pick up. At first, everyone was very excited. However, after passing 2 blockade lines, the scene was still the same when they came to the 3rd one. They were a little numb. Most importantly, they were carrying too many spoils of war on their backs, and they could no longer move. The 6th young master ordered us to put all the spoils together and cover them with the enemy's tents. Wait for the other troops behind to come and collect them. The rest of you continue to move forward and find a way to keep up with the main army. The new order relieved the pressure on the 2 logistics troops. Except for a small number of troops left behind to guard the spoils, most of the soldiers moved forward lightly, hoping to catch up with the main army. However, reality told them that they couldn't catch up with the main army. They couldn't even see a shadow of the main army. Yang Chendong also set out from Shangding City under the protection of 1,000 guards. The army in front of him won one battle after another, which made him feel good. Whether it was the 4th Cold Front Division or the 1st Cavalry Division, they didn't let him down. Originally, he was worried that 1 to 2 months was too short to destroy the Golden Bian dynasty. Now it seems that he should be worried about the lack of backup troops. There were too many spoils on the battlefield and they couldn't be transported. Beta Persei. Has the city lord of Shangding City mobilized the people? Yang Chendong asked Beta Persei as he rode the white dragon towards Jiba City. The young master has begun to mobilize. Haha, the young master is amazing. He used money to hire the people and let them be our logistics troops. This way, the spoils can be stored quickly and the people can earn money from it. Let them see the power of our army and form a deterrent force. It's really killing several birds with one stone. Beta Persei flattered with admiration. Since ancient times, fighting on the battlefield has always been the business of the soldiers. When did the people get involved? But only their 6th young master could come up with such a method. In this case, there were 70,000 to 80,000 people in Shangding City. Excluding the children of the elderly, there were also 50,000 adult men and women. In this way, it was equivalent to 50,000 more logistics troops, which would greatly reduce the pressure on the army. And as more and more cities were occupied along the way, there would be a lot of Han people in them. Wouldn't they be able to help the army and earn some money for themselves? This kind of good policy that was beneficial to the army and the people, perhaps only their 6th young master could come up with it. Beta Persei didn't know that Yang Chendong was well aware of the importance of the relationship between the army and the people. He was even more aware that the victory of his era was pushed by the people. With the ready-made experience, he was just using it. With the participation of 50,000 people, a large number of spoils of war were quickly carried back to Shangding City by the people who pulled the carriages. The mercenaries made money by counting the weight of the items they brought back. They could earn as much money as they wanted. Soon, the people tied the spoils of war to their bodies. Those who came late had nothing left to take. Fortunately, the mercenaries then gave the 6th young master's order. There were no more spoils of war from this battle, but there would be more spoils of war if they captured other cities. If the people wanted to make money, they could follow behind the mercenaries and there would be many more opportunities. In this way, a very spectacular scene was formed. The 2 main forces of the mercenaries were charging at the front. In the middle were more than 10,000 mercenaries and logisticians. Behind them were tens of thousands of civilians. Many of the tasks that the logisticians were supposed to do were done by them. This saved them a lot of manpower, allowing them to follow behind the main forces faster and obtain everything they needed. Back to the main topic. After the division of the 1st Cavalry Division, the speed of their advance was significantly faster. At dawn, 3 regiments of 6,000 cavalry had already arrived at a valley 5 miles outside of Jiba City. At this moment, the city gate of Jiba City had not yet opened. In one night, they killed nearly 30,000 enemies and broke through 5 blockade lines in a row. Surprisingly, the 1st Cavalry Division did not have a single death, and only a few dozen people were slightly injured. After a simple dressing, they ate and rested, waiting for the city gate to open to kill. Chapter 9:17. The sky was already bright, and the news of the defeat at the front had yet to reach them. Jiba City had already broken through the 4 gates as usual. Some listless gold-rimmed soldiers also walked towards the city gates, preparing for the day's work. Rumble. The earth suddenly trembled, causing the gold-rimmed soldiers who seemed to have not slept enough to look puzzled. Looking up at the sky, it was still clear, and there was no sign of heavy rain. Then where did the thunder come from? Until a soldier inadvertently looked ahead and saw countless black dots in the distance rapidly approaching. He finally couldn't help but shout, "Look! What is that?" After a full 2 breaths of silence, a gold-rimmed soldier was the first to wake up and shouted, "It's the enemy! It's the cavalry, quick! Close the city gates, everyone retreat into the city." It was just that it was too late to think of retreating at this time. As the vanguard, the 1st Cavalry Regiment, had already brought a group of brothers to the city gates. First, there was a long-range attack with bows and arrows. More than 10 soldiers guarding the north gate were killed by the arrows. The cavalry rushed into Jiba city like a torrent, unstoppable. The 2nd Cavalry Regiment will follow, and the 3rd Cavalry Regiment will be the last. Remember, after entering the city, close the 4 gates and prohibit anyone from entering or leaving. You must not let anyone go. Spread the news. Division Commander Tian, who rode on his horse and gave the military order. The later the footprints of the 1st Cavalry Division were known to the enemy, the more advantageous it would be for them. Tian, who knew that their advantage was that they were fast enough, and their charge was fierce enough. For example, the musketeers still needed to stop and aim at the target when charging, but they didn't need to. They only needed to charge continuously and kill the enemy on the way. But they also had their own disadvantages, and that was, once it involved siege warfare, their strength would be greatly restrained. How to take advantage of the enemy's unpreparedness and kill their way into the enemy's city became something that he needed to plan and consider. The cavalry entered the city, and along the way, anyone who blocked the way was cut in half by the cavalry's sword. This kind of charge that disregarded human lives quickly emptied the roads in the city to ensure that the cavalry could quickly run through the city without any restrictions. It was precisely because they were fast enough that the 2,000 defenders in Jiba City had not yet figured out what had happened. Even the soldiers who had asked for help did not have time to leave the city before they were firmly surrounded, and those who resisted were all killed. Occasionally, some commoners who had already left the city would be caught up by the cavalrymen. Those who refused to return to the city would naturally end up dead. 2 hours later, when it was almost noon, the situation in Jiba City was under control. The people stayed at home, and the surrendered soldiers were locked up in the barracks. The management of the entire city fell into the hands of Division Commander Tian, who tell everyone to eat and take the time to rest. We still have to continue our journey. Tian, who ordered the messenger beside him as he ate the hot dishes prepared by the chefs in the city lord mansion. After noon, the mighty bicycle army finally arrived. As soon as the 4th Division of the Cold Front Division appeared outside the city, the north gate of Jiba City was opened from the inside. A line of cavalry poured out and made a gesture of welcoming them into the city. The 1st Cavalry Division is really fast. With a sigh, Division Commander De Chong led the army into the city. Only half an hour later, the 1st Cavalry Division, who had been properly rested, left the city again. They handed over the management of Jiba City to the 4th Division of the Cold Front Division. In this regard, some of the officers of the 4th Division of the Cold Front Division were naturally unhappy. They were the main force, okay? Now it was like they were logistics troops receiving goods. But they had no choice. They rushed all the way here. And even their legs were sore from riding the bicycle. Now that they no longer had the strength to continue fighting outside the city, the name of the vanguard could only be placed on the 1st Cavalry Division. Compared to the 4th Division of the Cold Front Division, which was only a few hours later, 8,000 auxiliary soldiers and 8,000 Laos soldiers rushed to Jiba City early the next morning. Then the management of the city was once again handed over. The 4th Division of the Cold Front Division went straight to Jigging City, another important city of the Phnom Penh dynasty in the south. Jigging City, the main city in the north of the Phnom Penh dynasty. The population was close to 300,000, and there were about 5,000 troops stationed there. According to the rank of the defending general, Zhao En was a third-grade general of the Phnom Penh dynasty and had a lot of power. The news of the 5 blockade lines and the capture of Jiba City had not spread back. The defense of Jigging City was also as usual, and there was no increase in strength. General Zhao En also did not know that a disaster was about to befall him. He was still in the general's mansion in the city, listening to music and eating as usual. The 1st Cavalry Division, after rushing for half a day and a night, finally arrived 10 miles away from Jigging City before dawn. The cavalry scouts at the front had already sent back news that there was no place to hide the army outside the north of the city. Thus, Division Commander Tian, who gave the order for everyone to rest at a spot 10 li away from the city to recover their energy and charge into the city with vigor. This is the information sent by the Security Bureau. This is the location of the City Lord's mansion. This is the General's mansion. This is the granary. This is the city's warehouse. Tian, who hurriedly pointed out 7 or 8 very important locations. He then gave the 3 regimental commanders an order. Once they charged into the city, each regiment needed to occupy and control where they needed to occupy. The sky was bright, and the gate of Jigging City was wide open. The 1st Cavalry Division, 10 miles away, launched a charge. Just like in Jiba City, the appearance of the cavalry caught the defenders in the city by surprise. Just like in Jiba City, the cavalry did not even have time to close the city gate. Dozens of bows and arrows pierced through the air, and at the same time, the cavalry rushed into the city. Jigging City fell into the enemy's hands. General Zhao An was killed for resisting, and the governor and a group of city officials were captured alive. The only regret was that the fire in the city was lit, and the news of the battle here spread out. Let it spread out. We can't kill all the way to the capital of the Golden Bian dynasty quietly. Let's wait for the arrival of the 4th Cold Front Division, and the army will rest here. Tian, who did not show an angry look on his face. Since it was a sneak attack, they must be prepared to be discovered. They had occupied 2 cities in 2 days, one of which was an important town, and attacked their cavalry team, which was the least good at sieges. This result already made him very satisfied. In the evening, the 4th Cold Front Division was ready to appear. For a moment, the 2 armies converged in Jigging City. At this moment, when the division commanders and regimental commanders of both sides sat together, there was no contempt in their eyes like before, only admiration. What Tian Hu and the others admired was the tenacity of the 4th Cold Front Division. They relied on their legs to pedal the bicycle all the way, and they were not left behind even after 12 hours, which was half a day. Just this tenacity alone was enough to make people respect them. What Ling Dechang and the others admired was the drive of the 1st Cavalry Division. Along the way, everywhere they went, it was as if there was no one around. Such an army, such a powerful force, made them respect them from the bottom of their hearts. Division Commander Ling, the news has been leaked. It is probably impossible for us to sneak attack again. Next, we will have to rely on you to attack Chuanlong City. Tian Hu talked about the battle in front of them. Since it was a siege, of course the Cold Front Division, which was armed with firearms, would be the main force. Haha, no problem, no problem. Division Commander Tian and the others must be tired from the journey, and the war horses also need to be fed. This battle will depend on the 4th Division's performance. Ling Dechang said with a polite face. In his heart he felt a sense of exultation. Along the way, the 1st Cavalry Division had always been ahead of them. This time they could finally perform well. Okay. Tian, who still had a calm face as he replied. Perhaps he understood Ling Dechang's meaning, or perhaps he didn't. However, they were all members of the mercenary army, and there were some jobs that required cooperation. Ling Dechang laughed and left. Tian, who then said to the soldier beside him, "Inform the 3 regimental commanders to let them and the soldiers rest well. There will be a big battle soon." The 4th Cold Front Division moved quickly. Perhaps they were eager to show off. On the afternoon of the 2nd day, when the 4 auxiliary battalions in charge of receiving the captives arrived, they handed over the mission of guarding Jigjing City. Then the army left the city and rushed to Chuanlong City, which was 120 miles away. Standing on the city gate tower, Temu watched the 4th Cold Front Division leave the city. He couldn't help but ask, "Are we handing over the mission of being the vanguard?" Of course not. But for now, rest is the priority. Tian Hu shook his head, and then ordered the 3 regimental commanders. The 4th Division of the Cold Front left Orange Well City, and used an afternoon to ride to the outskirts of Chuanlong City. Facing the tightly shut city gates, Division Commander Dechang gave the order, and the mortars roared, hitting the city walls in the north. A huge hole appeared. A group that had long been prepared at the side sounded the bugle call to charge. 2,000 soldiers rushed out and entered Chuanlong City. The siege was unexpectedly smooth. Ling Dechang, who was standing in the middle of the army, put down his binoculars and shook his head. It seems that the enemy has retreated. This is an undefended city. It could be a trap. A trap? Are you saying that the Gold Border dynasty wants to lure us in, and then catch us in a jar? Yuan immediately realized that his analogy was inappropriate. He quickly shut his mouth. It doesn't sound nice, but that should be what it means. Ling Dachang said casually. If that's the case, then we won't enter the city. We'll find a wide area outside the city and wait. Let's see what tricks they have up their sleeves. The 3rd Regiment Commander Lu Zhang snorted. Obviously, he looked down on the little tricks that only 3-year-olds would play. Chapter 9:18. Commander Yi, what do you think? Ling Dachang seemed to value Yi Xingfeng a lot, or maybe he was very democratic. In any case, every time he discussed something, he needed everyone to express their opinion. The 4th commander, Yi Xingfeng, narrowed his eyes. We can do as Commander Lu says, but if we do that, the enemy will definitely not attack rashly. If that happens, we will lose a chance to kill the enemy. What do you mean? Are we going to jump into a trap even if we know it's one? Is it just to lure the enemy? 3rd Commander Lu Zhang saw that Yi Xingfeng was going to reject his suggestion, so his voice carried a trace of doubt. If we want to kill more enemies, then we should jump in. The 6th young master has taught us a lesson. Only by eliminating the enemy's strength to the greatest extent can we establish an invincible foundation. I just don't want to miss a chance to kill the enemy. Sigh, it would be great if Under Heaven's Cavalry Division No. 1 moved with us. With their cooperation, even if it was a trap, we could easily tear a hole in it. Yi Xingfeng said honestly. He had no intention of targeting Commander Lu Zhang. It was just that in a war, there were differences between the main force and the cooperation. It was normal to have different opinions, but to have grudges because of work was a serious work problem. Long before the battle, Yang Chendong had told them that if they found any grudges between officers of the same rank due to work, the wrongdoer would be severely punished. It was even possible that they would be stripped of their uniform and be expelled from the army. This was just one of Yang Chendong's strategies. It was to prevent disunity between officers. This was because the result of distrust could cause a war to go from victory to defeat. Yi Xingfeng thought of this and didn't want to argue with Lu Zhang. Lu Zhang seemed to have thought of something as well. He didn't argue with Yi Xingfeng and chose to keep quiet. Since he had already expressed his opinion, what to do next would be up to his division commander. Ling Dachang didn't care about the opinions of his subordinates. It was normal to have disagreements at work. Since he was able to take on the role of commander of Lungfeng, there was no problem with his personality. What he was thinking about now was whether he should enter the city or not. Just as Yi Xingfeng had said, once they entered the city, there would naturally be dangers. It was even possible for them to be surrounded. However, if they didn't enter the city, the enemy wouldn't appear. In this way, they wouldn't be able to severely damage the enemy's strength. Once the army enters the city, I don't believe that with the strength of our Cold Front Division, we will be afraid of these gold-edged soldiers. As for the 1st Cavalry Division, they are too tired from being the vanguard. Let them have a good rest in Orangewell City tonight. Ling Daqiang finally made the decision to enter the city. In his view, in front of great strength, all schemes were useless. This time, their 4th Division was going to use their military might and fighting strength to tell the enemy that in front of them, all schemes were like clowns jumping on a beam. They would be useless. The division commander gave the order and the 2nd, 3rd and 4th regiments as well as the division battalions began to enter Chuanlong City. As soon as they entered the city, they immediately occupied 4 city towers, overlooking everything inside and outside the city from a high vantage point. Lung Feng's 4 divisions entered the city. This scene was discovered by the scouts of Jin Bian dynasty in the distance. Then the news spread. Jin Bian army, who had already retreated from Chuanlong City, and reinforcements from Suing City arrived one after another. They surrounded Chuanlong City from 4 different directions. As expected, it was a trap. Standing on the city tower, Ling Daqiang saw the 30,000-strong army of the Gold Edge dynasty through his binoculars. He even saw the trebuchets and other siege weapons among the enemy troops. Give the order. The soldiers will guard the 4 city towers in company units. The other soldiers should take the time to rest and wait for dawn to counterattack. Ling Daqiang didn't expect the enemy to surround the city. On the contrary, he became excited because of the enemy's appearance. In his view, this would be a counterattack without any suspense and the final victory would belong to him. However, there was one thing he didn't expect, which was that there was a tactic called the center blossoming. From the moment the warning fireworks were lit on Jujing City, Chuanlong City was ready to abandon the city after receiving the news. This was originally a high-level secret of the Gold Edge dynasty's military. Even the Security Bureau didn't know about it. That was, once the city couldn't be defended, they would abandon it and use the center blossoming to inflict heavy damage on the enemy troops. Then they would win the war. To put it bluntly, they would give up the city first and wait for the enemy to enter the city. Then, they would set the city on fire at the right time to interfere with the enemy's arrangement in the city. Then they would work together to eliminate the enemy. And now they were using this method. Taking advantage of the fact that the sky had already darkened by the time the 4 Cold Front Division entered the city, they were unable to carefully investigate the situation within the city. Thus, they were preparing to set Chuanlong City on fire. Of course, the Cold Front Division were not to be trifled with. There was one rule in their training. When they entered a city, the first thing they had to do was to clear all the possible dangers in the city. In fact, they did this, but the direction was a little wrong. They mainly cleared out the mayor's residence in the city. They didn't search the general's residence, the granary, the storehouse, and other important places where the people gathered. After all, there were too many places like this, and it was far from being clear in a short time. Moreover, the Cold Front Division had the 95 style. If someone confronted them face to face, they wouldn't be afraid of anyone or any army. 10 miles north of Chuanlong City, 30,000 Gold Edge Dynasty troops were gathered here. The leader was one of the generals of the Gold Edge Dynasty, Hamo. He was originally a general sent by the dynasty to guard Suing City. This time, after hearing about the incident in Jujing City, he mobilized 10,000 guards in Suing City. In addition, the guards in some nearby cities gathered together with the soldiers who escaped from Chuanlong City. In a very short time, they set up such a pocket and waited for the mercenaries to enter. After the scouts in front of him sent news that the mercenaries had blasted open the north gate of Chuanlong City, he became very nervous. He even regretted not leaving a few thousand people to guard the city. At least, he could create a false impression for the mercenaries that Chuanlong City was not intentionally given up by him, but was taken by force. This way, the other party could enter the city and trick them. Hamo prayed in his heart that the mercenaries must enter the city. Otherwise, all his preparations would be in vain. Not only that, he might even be accused of giving up on Chuanlong City and retreating without a fight. Amidst his nervousness, time seemed to pass very slowly. When the scouts sent news that the mercenaries had all entered the city, and there were nearly 10,000 of them, Hamo's anxious heart slowly relaxed. Nearly 10,000 enemies were now surrounded by him. With 3 times the number of soldiers and the support of the people in the city, Hamo seemed to see a golden path in front of him. What were mercenaries? Even General Dagon and General Hun Sun had been defeated by such a powerful enemy. If he defeated them, wouldn't that prove that he was more powerful than these 2 generals? At that time, everyone would think highly of him. At that time, wouldn't glory, splendor, and wealth be within reach? Excited, Hamo began to mobilize his troops. Of the 30,000 soldiers under him, 20,000 were sent out, 5,000 to each gate. He wanted to teach the mercenaries a lesson. The outside of Chuanlong City was completely surrounded. Inside the city, Ling Daqiang did not panic in the slightest. At this moment, he was only waiting for the enemy to take the initiative to attack. Then he would let the enemy know that in the face of great power, this so-called siege was a joke. Just as Ling Daqiang was waiting for the other party to attack, he suddenly felt the surrounding temperature rise. Then a huge fire shone on his face, and his expression turned ugly in an instant. Reporting to Division Commander, Many places in the city have been set ablaze, and the fire is spreading rapidly. The 4 commanders ask for instructions. What should we do? Reporting to division commander, the fire has spread everywhere, and it is impossible to extinguish it. Moreover, it seems to be surrounding our army. The 4 commanders ask for instructions. Should we break out of the city? Reporting to division commander, we must retreat. The fire is about to reach you. Please leave with us. News after news was sent to Ling Daqiang, and he finally figured out what the Phnom Penh army was planning. He thought that he had been very careful, but he did not expect the enemy to be so crazy. The fire started in the residential area first, and many people in the city would be buried with it. Really ruthless. Ling Daqiang sighed and sighed. In order to win, the Phnom Penh army treated the lives of the people like grass. He shook his head and issued a military order, ordering all the troops to withdraw from the north gate. After issuing the order, Ling Daqiang staggered and almost fell to the ground. Forcibly leaving the city in the middle of the night was not a wise move. Although the 4 divisions of the Cold Front were well trained, and there should be no chaos in the army, it was inevitable that they would suffer losses in a hurry. Ling Daqiang, who was supported by the guards, was now thinking of reducing the losses as much as possible. If the 4 divisions were seriously injured because of this, he was afraid that he would not have the face to see the 6th young master and his other comrades. The fire was burning in Chuanlong City, and it was clearly visible from far away. In the middle of the Phnom Penh army, General Hamo laughed. He did not dare to expect that the 30,000 troops could eliminate nearly 10,000 mercenaries, but as long as they could seriously injure them and force them to retreat, it would be a great achievement. Chapter 919. The golden path was right in front of him, and it was only a matter of time before he was made a marquis. At this moment, Hamo felt that the air was so fresh, and life was so beautiful. However, all of this quickly disappeared. A group of cavalrymen had entered the battlefield at some point in time, and were heading straight for the side of his army. Kill. Don't leave a single one alive. Tian, who rode on his horse and waved his 2 swords as he killed his way into the middle of the Phnom Penh army. One by one, the unprepared Phnom Penh soldiers were cut down under their horses. The sudden appearance of the 1st Cavalry Division was completely out of Hamo's expectations. Faced with this sudden attack, the Central Army did not even last half an hour before collapsing. Even more people were scared out of their wits in the face of this murderous god from hell. They did not even have the courage to fight and turned to flee. More and more deserters appeared, and Hubo, led the 2nd Regiment to attack from the left flank. Wherever they went, it was like hell on earth, and those who stood in their way were either dead or heavily injured. Their sharp sabers beheaded enemy after enemy, and the morale of the Phnom Penh army was completely crushed. Seeing the heads of the soldiers sent flying in just a few moments, Hamo was also scared out of his wits. He abandoned his army and fled under the protection of some of his personal guards. There's an enemy cavalry unit over there. Chase after them. Hubo led the charge, and after killing a dozen enemies he saw Hamo fleeing and immediately led the 3rd Regiment to chase after him. The 1st and 2nd Regiments also entered the battlefield at this moment, and began their work like reaping machines. Originally, victory was in their grasp, and even victory was right in front of their eyes. However, the sudden appearance of the world's 1st Cavalry Division changed the situation. With Hamo's escape, the Central Army fell into chaos, and the entire army lost a unified commander. When the 4th Regiment of the Cold Front Division retreated from the north gate of Chuanlong City, they did not see the Central Army that was supposed to be gathered here. There were only 5,000 enemies that were supposed to be here. Open fire, exterminate them. There were only 5,000 enemies. The 1st Regiment commander immediately gave the order to counterattack. The 2,000 soldiers of the 1st Regiment took turns to provide cover as they charged towards the 5,000 enemies. The Gold Edge army outside the north gate was very excited when they saw the mercenaries appear. They were waiting for the reinforcements outside the other gates to arrive. Then they could rush forward with their large number of soldiers. As long as they could fight with the mercenaries, the power of the other party's flintlock would be greatly hindered. With their strength, they might win the final victory. However, after waiting for a long time, not only did they not see any reinforcements, they instead received a piece of shocking news. The main army had been disrupted by the mercenaries' cavalry, and Hamo had already fled towards Suing City. Where did the cavalry come from? Or was this simply the mercenaries' plan to beat them at their own game? Thinking that this might be the other party's plan, the 5,000 soldiers of Phnom Penh who were guarding the north gate were in a mess. They thought that they had set a trap, and were going to deal with others. Only then did he realize that he was the one who had fallen into the trap. Even so, how could they still dare to stay here and wait for the other party to eat them? Before they could charge, the 5,000 soldiers retreated in chaos. Without any threat, the 1st Regiment quickly steadied themselves. Then the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Regiment, including the last division's battalion, safely withdrew from Chuanlong City. Although they were covered in dust when they left the city, and hundreds of soldiers were slightly burned, no one paid with their lives for this. Most importantly, the army withdrew safely and did not encounter the siege outside the city as they had imagined. The division commander, De Chong, had a puzzled expression. He did not understand what the Gold Edge army was doing. Why did they give up this opportunity to seriously injure him? Did they just set a fire to scare him? Investigate. Send out all the scouts. Find out what's going on. A commander who did not understand the situation on the battlefield was not fit for his job. De Chong felt that he was now blind and had lost his wisdom. Reporting, the world's #1 cavalry division is calling. A telegram appeared at the right time, and gave a brief explanation of the situation on the battlefield. Looking at the telegram sent by Tian Hu, he finally understood the situation outside. Da Qiang let out a sigh of relief. Commander Tian called. They have broken through the middle of the Phnom Penh army, and are now chasing the enemy generals. They are ready to kill their way into Suing City. He asked us to eliminate the remaining enemies here as soon as possible, and then asked us to meet in Suing City. After a brief explanation of the situation, De Chong's face was filled with emotions. He had always thought that he could be faster than the enemy, but now it seemed that the credit would be taken by the enemy. But this time he was not jealous. If the enemy had not appeared in time, the 4 divisions of Lung Feng would have been heavily injured. The enemy had saved his life, and he had to acknowledge this debt. Every regiment, quickly eliminate the enemy. Gather in 4 hours and set off for Suing City. De Chong used his identity as a division commander to point out the direction for the troops. Sporadic gunshots rang out on the battlefield. Hu Bo was closely following the dozens of cavalry in front of him. After confirming that the enemy was the Gold Edge general, and that they were escaping in the direction of Suing City, he was no longer in a hurry. He had the soldiers follow behind at a distance of 1 li, neither fast nor slow. Every cavalry member of the 1st Cavalry Division had brought 2 groups of war horses with them. They could switch horses at any time to increase their speed to the maximum, and also to maintain their peak condition. Hu Bo intentionally slowed down. After more than 2 hours, Division Commander Tian, who led the main force, to catch up. When he saw that the 3 regiments were only following closely behind, and did not launch a quick attack, Tian, whose usually stern face actually revealed a smile. Not bad, not bad. Commander who is very considerate. Clearly, Tian, who had seen through Hu Bo's plan to bait the big fish. With the speed of 1 man and 2 horses of the 1st Cavalry Division, it was naturally not difficult for them to catch up to Hamo. However, they did not do so because they wanted to use this person to knock down Suing City's sturdy gates. News of their appearance had already spread. It was impossible to sneak into the city like before. Cavalry sieges were ultimately a weakness. If they could not sneak in and force their way through, they could only rely on their wits. Hamo was a very good bait. In order to allow the 3 regiments to successfully complete their mission, Tian, who took the initiative to maintain a certain distance, giving them enough space to execute their plan. When Hu Bo discovered that the main force was not in a hurry to meet up with him, he relaxed. Since his division commander had already understood his intentions, he would just have to perform well. General Hamo, who was running at the front, would occasionally turn back to look. When he discovered that the distance between the 2 sides was always about 1 li, He finally let out a sigh of relief. Reality had proven that the difference in speed between the two sides was not much. This one li distance would be his chance of survival. It was supposed to be a night of harvesting the fruits of their victory, but Hammer had been running all night. Around noon the next day, the gates of Suwing City finally appeared in his line of sight. At that moment he felt like crying. Everyone, your blood will not be shed in vain. I will take care of your families. Right now, this general orders you to bring up the rear, and by time for me to enter the city. When they were 4 li away from the tightly shut gates of Suwing City, Hamo revealed his true appearance and ordered his personal guards to bring up the rear. Behind them was the 1st Cavalry Division. If they stayed behind, they would undoubtedly die. But even if Hamo gave the order, if they disobeyed, they would still die. Moreover, their families would not be taken care of. At this moment, the dozens of bodyguards revealed pained expressions on their faces. General, you must do as you say. I'll leave my mother in your care. General, my son is still young. I hope you can take care of him for a few more years and help him grow up. General, my father's health is not good. The personal guard spoke to Hamo as if they were leaving behind their last words. Then, when they were 1 li away from the gates, the several dozen riders stopped and turned their horses around, preparing to fight to the death, and by time for the general to enter the city. Hamo nodded one by one. He would agree to any request made by his personal guards, but only he knew whether he would really do it. His personal guards stayed behind to bring up the rear. He rode alone to the northern gates of Suwing City and shouted at the top of the city tower, I am General Hamo. I have important military intelligence to report. Open the gates immediately and let me in. General, the enemy is behind you. It's too dangerous to open the gates now. A centurion guarding the city looked at the unidentified cavalrymen, who were only a mile away from the city gate, and said while spinning his legs, If you can't report this important intelligence to the king, then you will all die. All of you will die. I order you to open the gates now. Hurry. Hamo did not care. He had fled for an entire night and half a day, sacrificing all of his personal guards, all for the sake of his life. To achieve this goal, he had constantly roared and threatened. Hamo's rank in the army was very high. Now that he had given the order, the centurion was forced to open the gates, since there was no general guarding Suwing City. As the gates opened bit by bit, Hamo's face was filled with excitement. When he thought about how he could finally live, he happily turned around. When he turned around, he immediately felt his soul leaving his body. 2 of his 3 souls were gone. He did not know when, but the several dozen personal guards he had left behind had already turned into corpses lying on the ground. The enemy cavalry behind him was less than an arrow's throw away. Ah! Open the gates! Open the gates! Hamo's thirst for life made him shout loudly. At that moment, as if the heavens had heard his prayers, the gates finally opened halfway, allowing a cavalry to enter. Chapter 920. Ha 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 ha. Ah. Just as Hammer was about to enter, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back. When he looked down, he saw a sharp arrow protruding from the left side of his chest. His expression quickly froze, and with a plop, Hammer fell off his horse. It was Hubo who shot the arrow. After severely injuring Hamo with an arrow, he was the first to arrive at the city gate. With a swing of his saber, a gold-rimmed soldier who was about to close the gate was cut down to the ground. The city gate was half opened, giving the remaining cavalrymen an opening to enter. They were like great white sharks that had smelled blood and took the opportunity to enter. Men, tie this man up. Thinking that he had captured the enemy's general alive, Hubo ordered his men to take him down. Then he and the others pushed the half-open gate open completely. At this moment, Tian, who arrived with the 1st and 2nd regiments, the army successfully entered the city. The bravery of the cavalry was not something the gilded border soldiers could resist. With the speed of the war horses, the front of the gate was soon littered with corpses. The mercenaries had entered the city. As soon as the news spread, the gilded border soldiers at the other gates fled madly. At this moment, they only wished their parents had given them 2 more legs. The officials of the Gilded Border Dynasty, who were in charge of the defense of Suing City, all fled when they heard that the mercenaries had suddenly entered the city. Some even left their families behind, hoping to escape with their lives. No one would have thought that a strategic location like Suing City, the gateway to the capital of the Gilded Border Dynasty, would be given up just like that. There was not even a decent resistance. As it turned out, the speed of the 1st Cavalry Division's attack exceeded everyone's expectations. Tian, who entered the city and quickly took over the 4 gates, as well as the granaries and storehouses. They did not act rashly. There were tens of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of thousands of civilians in the city. They only had 6,000 people. If something unexpected happened, the weakness of their forces would be exposed. It might even lead to a strong counterattack. Guard the 4 gates and the important places. Don't worry about the other places. Just let them do whatever they want. The commander gave the order, and the cavalry naturally followed it. As a result, the people in the city were the ones who suffered. When the Phnom Penh troops, who were afraid of death and had just fled to various parts of the city, found that the mercenaries did not launch a large-scale search and massacre, they did not think about how to rush out of the city, but how to burn, kill, and loot during this unregulated time. Everyone had their own selfish desires, and they also had a dark side to them. Usually, because of the strict management, they had to be self-disciplined. Most people didn't dare to show it. But now it was different. The law that was weighing on their heads had disappeared. They didn't even see a single person in charge. They had become completely free people, and could do whatever they wanted. As a result, it was inevitable that the army would loot the civilians. The thugs on the streets would loot the civilians. Even the younger and stronger men would form groups of 3 to 5 to loot the civilians. The wealthy families in the city who didn't manage to escape in time couldn't avoid becoming the first targets. Suwon City was in chaos, and there were sounds of fighting and killing everywhere. Who knew how many commoners had suffered an undeserved calamity? Their family's only wealth had been rummaged through and taken away. The young women in the family, or those who were slightly more beautiful, had also become the targets of the robbery. Cries and shouts could be heard incessantly, begging for mercy and complaining. On the streets, one could often see groups of robbers running back and forth. Sometimes, they would even engage in internal strife due to the uneven distribution of the spoils. The sounds of swords clashing were also incessant. Standing on top of the 4 city towers, one could roughly see what was happening in the city center. Tian, who called the 3 commanders to inquire about the situation. But when it came to the civil strife in the city, no one mentioned it. This kind of internal strife was beneficial to the mercenaries. More importantly, after this internal strife, the people here hated the bandits far more than they hated them. Moreover, the mercenaries could enter in the name of suppressing the bandits, and take the wealth that originally belonged to the people from the bandits openly. They didn't have to worry about being criticized by others or being pressured by public opinion. Half a day later, the 4th Division of the Lungfeng Army entered Suwing City. A day later, the first batch of 4 battalions of auxiliary soldiers entered the city. 2 days later, Yang Chendong arrived in Suwing City under the protection of 1,000 guards. Along with him were 10 battalions of auxiliary soldiers and 5,000 Lao army soldiers. Their strength continued to grow. After 4 days of looting, Suwing City was in chaos. On the streets, there were women and old people who had been killed, as well as men who had killed each other. The doors of some houses were wide open, indicating that they had experienced an inhumane robbery and that their houses had nothing on them. It's time to end this. Pass the order down, reel in the net. Anyone who resists, kill. Yang Chendong stood on top of the southern city tower, looking at the burning Suwing City, and said with a hint of anger. This scene was not out of Yang Chendong's expectations. Perhaps this was part of human nature. Before the war, Yang Chendong had thought of all sorts of possibilities. He even thought that after this battle, the Kim Bien dynasty would suffer heavy losses. But this was war, a game where either you die or I live. There was a saying that mercy to the enemy was cruelty to oneself. Since Yang Chendong already knew about the story of the farmer and the snake, he would not let it happen again. Otherwise, in the near future, The ones who would die would be the Han people. As the saying goes, if I don't go to hell, who will? For the sake of the Han people, for the sake of dignity, for the sake of the future generations, some sacrifices were necessary. It was like a person eating a bun. Not only could he eat meat, but he could also eat noodles. War was the same. The army of the enemy forces must be destroyed, and the people of the enemy forces must also be affected. This was inevitable. I hope the world can be peaceful in the future. After today's battle, Yang Chendong didn't dare to hope that there would be no more wars in this world, but at the very least, it could last for a few more years. It could give the people more time to live in peace and a better environment. It could also let them know that life was actually very beautiful. Send a message to Yang and ask him to persuade the Kim Bien royal family to surrender. If there is no news after 2 days, we will launch a new round of attacks. The attack was so smooth, especially the excellent performance of the 1st Cavalry Division, which was somewhat beyond Yang Chendong's expectations. Now it was time to force the other party to surrender. Kim Bien City, the capital of the Kim Bien dynasty. The news of the mercenary army's invasion and the capture of Jiba, Orangewell, Chuanlong and Suing cities spread throughout Kim Bien City. For a time, the people were in a panic, and the social order began to be chaotic. More than a year ago, the Kim Bien dynasty had experienced such a war. But fortunately, the foundation was good. Although some aspects of work had not been fully restored after the war, at least the lives of the people were still guaranteed. And this time, the scale of the army was obviously larger than the previous one. The experienced merchants in the city immediately began to hoard goods. For a time, the price of rice in Kim Bien had become so expensive that the people at the bottom had no food to eat. Even the ordinary people were facing the possibility of starvation at any time. The regime of the Kim Bien dynasty was still there, so it was naturally impossible for there to be civil strife like in Suing City. However, there was already chaos on the streets. For this reason, the city guards were dispatched twice to arrest some people. But this was just a temporary solution. When the people had no food to eat, even if they knew that they would be beheaded, they would still rebel. In the palace, King Boromir was sitting high, discussing countermeasures with his ministers. Compared to usual, Boromir's face was obviously anxious at this moment. This time, the mercenaries had gone to war without declaring war. Not only did it violate the rules, but it also caught him off guard. Based on the battle reports, the mercenaries had sent out very elite troops. It was not like the intelligence report said that they used the local army like Laos. What are you doing? What are you doing? Drag them out and behead them in public. As soon as the meeting began, Boromir did not hide the anger in his heart. The first person to be executed was the official in charge of the intelligence department. Because he did not give a warning in time, he became the first high-ranking official to be beheaded. Cries for help and cries of injustice echoed in the hall. The official in charge of the intelligence department had already been dragged out. Not long after, there were no more cries. It was obvious that he was dead. For a moment, many of the ministers' faces were very ugly. The king was really angry. At this moment, if he said something wrong, it was very likely that he would bring about an unexpected disaster. Boromir's emotions didn't ease up even after killing the soldiers. His eyes flickered as he looked at the ministers and said in a hoarse voice, "Nearly 100,000 soldiers were completely defeated in just a few days. Most of them were killed or captured, and the cities were lost one after another. Who can answer me? Why is this so? Also, what do you mean by the city's impregnable defense? Who can explain?" In the face of the king's anger, many of the ministers lowered their heads. Everyone knew the strength of the Phnom Penh army. It was not a problem to frighten the ordinary people. However, it was not on the same level as the elite mercenaries. Not to mention, the mercenaries had launched a surprise attack. They were not prepared at all. It was normal for such an outcome to happen. What they were thinking about now was what the mercenaries were after this time. Should it be the same deterrence as last time? Or should it be more beneficial? Or did they really want to annex the entire Phnom Penh dynasty, just like how they had annexed the Jiaoji and Lansong kingdoms? Chapter 921. At this moment, the ministers realized that they still knew too little about the mercenaries' appetites and strength. They couldn't make the right judgment and naturally didn't know what to say. The ministers kept their mouths shut, and the palace was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. King Boromir was furious and shouted, "What? Are you all mute? Weren't they all good at talking when they were fighting for power and profit? Why aren't you speaking now? Speak, speak to this prince, otherwise, all of you will be thrown into the prison. Speak." Since Boromir was angry, the ministers couldn't remain silent. Right Prime Minister Dun stood at the head of the crowd. He felt that the time was right, and was the first to step forward. "Your Majesty, I have something to say." "Right Prime Minister, speak." Boromir's eyes lit up when he saw Dun step forward. "Your Majesty, the mercenaries' representative, Mr. Yunk, has arrived at Goldenrim City and is now in my residence. He brought the latest news of the great Ming Dynasty's Duke Zhongwei, and requested to meet with your Majesty." Dun looked up at Boromir and said. After he finished speaking, he lowered his head, his eyes focused on his nose, and his nose focused on his heart. He was as silent as a monk. He knew what kind of consequences he would face after saying those words. However, he knew that he would be fine. This was because he represented peace talks. Although this was not the king's first choice, it was still a path of retreat. Unless the mercenaries were defeated, no one would give up this path of retreat so easily. This was where the king's survival lay. Sure enough, after saying this, Dun was immediately attacked by all kinds of people. "What traitor? What traitor? What spy?" All sorts of accusations were thrown at him. At this moment, the officials were furious. It was as if anyone who did not open their mouths to scold Dwayne might be Dwayne's accomplice. Among them, Left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei was the most enthusiastic. The last time the mercenaries came, he suffered a lot because he misjudged the situation. Fortunately, he was experienced enough and had the king's trust, so he was able to retain his position. However, since then he was obviously at a disadvantage when fighting with the right Prime Minister. After becoming the Minister of the Left, Ding Dingwei's wisdom was needless to say. He quickly went into hiding and waited for an opportunity to counterattack. Now that the opportunity presented itself, he would not let it go. He began to scold Dun. When he felt tired, he saluted Boromir and said, "Your Majesty, Dun's heart is no longer with the Goldenbean dynasty. He is clearly a spy for the mercenaries, a spy. This subject requests your Majesty to give the order to kill him, and then surround the right Prime Minister's residence. Capture the mercenary representative, Yunk, and behead him in public." "Your Majesty, please give the order to kill Dun and the mercenary representative." The courtiers replied in unison, their expressions solemn, as if they had some sort of life and death feud with Dun and Skylark. Boromir did not look pleased at the unity of his subordinates. He knew that these officials were just worried that he would make an example out of them. Now that they had another target to vent their anger on, they wanted to divert the conflict. What Dun did really annoyed him. He secretly communicated with the mercenaries without a decree. How could a loyal official do such a thing? For this reason, it wouldn't be too much to teach him a lesson, but there was no need to kill him. According to the reports from the front lines, the mercenaries had occupied Suwing City for several days, and had no intention of attacking. He could use this opportunity to mobilize his troops, but if he killed the other party's messenger, it would be forcing the mercenaries to be ruthless, which would be equivalent to slapping himself in the face, and he would not do such a thing. It was precisely because Dun had grasped the king's mentality that he was able to say these things without fear. Now that the courtiers had shouted their request, they only needed to wait for Boromir's answer. At this moment, Dun raised his head and looked at their high and mighty king. "Well, why don't we kill the messenger when two countries are at war? Everyone wants me to kill the messenger. Isn't that making this king unjust? Men, go to the right Prime Minister's residence, and bring the messenger of the mercenaries here." Boromir finally made his decision, and pretended to reprimand his subordinates. Many of the courtiers immediately shut their mouths. They had no intention of going against the right Prime Minister, but the situation was like this. If they did not stand up, it would be easy for them to be punished. They were just following the crowd and shouting their slogans. As for the final decision, it was up to His Majesty to make. Now that the decision was made, many courtiers wisely shut their mouths. Only the left Prime Minister, Ding Dingwei, continued to shout, "Your Majesty, we can meet the messenger, but Dun is indeed suspected of being in cahoots with foreign countries. He must be severely punished. Otherwise, if everyone follows suit, wouldn't the country be in chaos?" "All right, left Prime Minister, this king understands everything. Let's talk about it after we meet the messenger." Boromir interrupted Ding Dingwei's request. He really wanted to figure out the purpose of this mercenary group, and before he had an answer, he wouldn't act rashly. The hall became quiet again. After about half an hour, the sound of footsteps finally came from outside the hall. The king's guards appeared, and behind them was a middle-aged man in Han Chinese clothes. His face was calm, and his eyes were spirited. He walked forward step by step and stood between the two rows of officials. "Courtier Yunk greets Your Majesty, and sends his greetings." "You don't have to be so courteous." Boromir suppressed his anger and appeared very calm. After all, he was the king of a country. He could not lose his composure so easily. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Skylark, who had no intention of greeting Boromir, immediately raised her head and smiled at Boromir. At this moment, Boromir also looked at the other party's face. After 2 breaths of time, Boromir was the first to feel uncomfortable. He gently tilted his head to the side and said, "This time, the Duke of Loyalty didn't even give a greeting before dispatching his troops. He killed 100,000 soldiers and nearly 1 million civilians. He robbed my city and plundered my wealth. This kind of bandit behavior is shameful. Does the envoy have any explanation for this?" "Your Majesty is wrong. The Duke of Loyalty sent his troops to the south because you tore up the friendly trade agreement. You stationed your troops at the border and blocked the trade route. We were only passive and took the initiative to strike first." Yunk was already prepared for this, so he did not hesitate to answer. "Passive and took the initiative to strike first? Haha, what a joke." Boromir looked up to the sky and laughed to express the anger in his heart. This was simply unreasonable. But he also knew that he was now the weaker party, and there was no point in continuing to argue. In Suing City, 300 miles away from Goldenrim City, the mercenaries might be ready to go. Now was not the time to reason, but to find out what the other party's purpose was. Soon after, Boromir stopped laughing. When he looked at Skylark, he regained his composure. "Emissary, why don't you tell me what your Duke of Loyalty wants?" "Okay," Yunk replied. He then raised his head and said in an incomparably serious tone, "The Duke of Loyalty said that the Goldenrim dynasty has gone back on its words and there is no need for it to exist. Now the only way out is to surrender. The Duke of Loyalty can guarantee everyone's safety. He can even protect part of everyone's personal wealth." "Shut up, bastard." Left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei finally couldn't help but reprimand him. He raised his right hand and pointed at Yunk, saying, "Your Duke of Loyalty wants to annex my Goldenrim dynasty. He needs to have the strength and appetite to do so." "Haha, you must be the left Prime Minister. You will soon know if the Duke of Loyalty has such an appetite. Look at your 100,000 troops in several major cities. Didn't you lose them in just a few days? How many of such troops in major cities do you have? How many times can you withstand the attacks of the mercenaries? By the way, there is one thing I forgot to tell everyone. The Duke of Loyalty has already given an order. He will give you 2 days to surrender. Otherwise, you will know what it means to be under the pressure of a large army, and what it means to be in despair." "Shut up." Seeing Yunk boasting so shamelessly at this time, Ding Dingwei roared angrily. He then turned to Boromir and said, "Your Majesty, this person was disrespectful to you in the hall. I would like to ask you to punish him for disrespect and behead him in public." Ding Dingwei wanted to kill Yun Ke, but the person who was about to be killed had a calm expression on his face. It was as if he did not hear those words. His face was still incomparably calm, as if what they were talking about had nothing to do with him. Skylark's calm demeanor made Boromir gnash his teeth in anger. However, he knew that Skylark couldn't die just yet. Just as Right Prime Minister Duen had thought, this would be a way out for him. Unless he could gain the upper hand, he couldn't casually kill the messenger sent by the Duke of Loyalty. That would create a life and death feud. On the contrary, not only could he not kill Yunk, but he also had to protect him. At least before the overall situation was settled, nothing could happen to this person. The Right Prime Minister is suspected of colluding with a foreign country. However, due to insufficient evidence, he is now relieved of all his duties. Go home and wait for orders. Messenger, please stay in the mansion with the Right Prime Minister. This king will consider your request. Sure enough, there was no killing, only house arrest. This result was within the expectations of many people. Right Minister Dun and emissary Yunk were already prepared. When they heard this decree, they didn't argue or refute it. Instead, they cupped their fists and the two of them walked down the hall. Chapter 922. When they left the hall, Minister Ding Ding Wei's voice was still echoing. Your Majesty, you can't let them go. Boromir did not reply immediately. He watched them leave. Then he said, how can I let them go? Keeping them alive will only numb the loyalty of the Duke of Valor and the mercenaries. Minister, let me ask you, if we gather the entire country's army to fight the mercenaries, what is the outcome? Boromir was about to start a war. Ding Ding Wei calmed himself down and said, there are too many borders between Phnom Penh and Laos. We can't mobilize the troops guarding the eastern cities. Otherwise, if the mercenaries attack from there, the consequences will be unimaginable. In this way, the only army that can be mobilized is the 200,000 soldiers near the royal city. However, according to the information we received, the mercenaries only have a few tens of thousands of people, and the elite strength is less than 20,000. With 200,000 against 20,000, even if it's a battle of attrition, we can still exhaust them to death. Good. King Boromir was waiting for this. It was almost impossible for him to surrender. At least, he would not surrender before the battle was over. Ding Ding Wei was also a little excited. What he needed to do now was to encourage the king. Otherwise, if the king of a country was about to admit defeat, what would the people below be able to do? Your Majesty, we can put in 200,000 soldiers on the battlefield. As long as we can stop the enemy's attack, Siam and Ava will not sit back and do nothing. When their reinforcements arrive, it will be time for us to counterattack with all our might. If it's possible, the capital can start conscripting soldiers right now and mobilize the entire country. We have more than 4 million citizens, so it's possible for us to gather an army of a few 100,000. As long as Your Majesty opens the national treasury, as long as there is money, it will be easy. Ding Ding Wei, who was getting more and more excited, seemed to have thought of something and continued. Your Majesty, our intelligence department reported that in Dragon River City, a fire burned hundreds of thousands of our citizens, causing the entire Dragon River City to be plunged into misery and suffering. Once the mercenaries' actions are spread out, it will definitely attract the support of the citizens of the country. At that time, we can use the power of the country to block the mercenaries' iron hooves. Victory will eventually belong to us. Good. We will do as you say. However, we need to be careful about the recruitment of new soldiers. After all, the war is imminent. Even if these people join the army, they will not be able to form an effective fighting force in a short time. How about this? Let the officials and merchants in the capital take out some money and try to recruit some new soldiers. We will decide after we see how the situation goes. Boromir agreed to all of Ding Ding Wei's requests. He even gave him the command of the army. However, he had a different opinion on the recruitment of new soldiers. Saying that the new recruits were weak was just an excuse. In the end, Boromir did not want to use the money in the national treasury. From this, it could be seen that as the king he did not have high hopes for this battle. No matter how dangerous the situation was, as long as he had money, he would have a chance to rise again. Left Prime Minister Ding Ding Wei naturally saw through this point, but he did not raise any doubts about this matter. Rice had to be eaten one bite at a time. First, they had to decide on the idea of going to war. As for the matter of recruiting new soldiers, it was inevitable. As long as there was hope for victory, presumably the king would make the right choice. The court session came to an end. Ding Ding Wei was given power, and the army and local affairs were handed over to him. Orders were given out as the armies gathered and surrounded Suwing City from the vicinity of the royal capital. At some point, a rumor had spread in the city that the mercenaries were extremely cruel and had burned down Chuanlong City. The hundreds of thousands of people in the city had either died or been injured. The tens of thousands of gold-edged soldiers in the city had also suffered heavy losses. Commander Hamo had died heroically while protecting the civilians as they retreated. Once this news came out, it immediately aroused the hatred of many people. Many people began to look for ways to serve the country and resist the enemy. It was at this time that the officials and merchants of the royal capital began to donate money and goods. The leader was Ding Ding Wei. In order to raise more money and goods, he had sold an ancestral property in the royal capital. With him taking the lead, the other ministers and the merchants who were inextricably linked to them had no choice but to cough up some blood. Naturally, there was no lack of people who were stingy, but soon some people were arrested and imprisoned for various crimes. This was Ding Ding Wei's counterattack. He wanted to make an example out of them. And with such examples, the officials and merchants became more proactive in donating money and goods. Gold Edge City was making preparations for the counterattack under Ding Ding Wei's command. But no matter how hard they tried, 2 days of preparation was far from enough in the face of a war. For this matter, Ding Ding Wei went to the palace, hoping to have more time to prepare. King Boromir immediately agreed, and then sent someone to Dun's house to inform Skylark that they were considering and studying the issue of whether to surrender the mercenaries or not. But it was impossible to reach a consensus in a short time, so they needed more time to prepare. He also hoped that Skylark could inform the Duke of Loyalty to suspend all military operations. Okay, I got it. Skylark's face was calm, not showing the slightest excitement when the other party said that they were considering the issue of surrender. After the messenger left, Dun looked at Skylark nervously. Mr. Yun, you don't really think that my king will surrender to your mercenaries, do you? Why not? Skylark sat back on the chair and gently sipped the hot tea with a faint smile on his face. Mr. Yun, although we are under house arrest and can't get out, we can still hear some of the movements on the streets. Now that the entire King City is preparing to fight against the mercenaries, this is clearly the sign of a great war. The so-called surrender is just a temporary measure to buy time, Dwayne said with a tense expression. It was true that Dun was the right prime minister of the Golden Bien dynasty. However, with the appearance of Skylark and the conditions of the deal, he boarded the mercenary ship. He had already made his stand clear in the court. Now there was no way out. Next, unless the Gold Edge dynasty was really destroyed, otherwise, no matter where he lived in the future, he might face the possibility of revenge at any time. So if one had to say who was more nervous about the situation now, it was not Skylark, but Dun. Skylark saw that Dun was so anxious, but his smile did not diminish. Sir Du's words are indeed for the sake of the mercenaries. Here, I would like to express my gratitude to you. Hey, we're all family. There's no need to thank me. Dun's face showed a pretentious expression, but in his heart, these words were very effective. He did not know why he believed Skylark's words so easily. At first he regretted it. However, the front line of the war continued to send in news about the mercenaries' continuous victories and the Gold Edge army's continuous failures and retreats. He suddenly felt a little fortunate that his choice did not seem to be wrong. He thought that if the mercenaries really captured the Gold Edge dynasty like they did to Jiaoji and Kanglin Kingdom, although he could not be a minister in the court, he would be able to get the position of the president of the Gold Edge Region's Business Association, plus 200,000 taels of silver as a reward. Compared to those ministers who lost their countries, his treatment was quite good. After making up his mind to follow the mercenaries, Dun reminded Skylark to prevent the other party from playing any tricks. Skylark laughed and said, I just said that I know everything. But since Boromov did not make the decision to surrender, the attack after 2 days will not stop. Oh, now there should be 1 day left. Oh. Ha. Skylark's answer made Dun stunned at first, then he laughed. Yes, knowing did not mean that he would agree. It was just an attitude of returning the news. It seemed that this time the mercenaries would not stop until they had swallowed the Gold Edge dynasty. At this moment, Dun's worries disappeared. Unaware of the problem in Skylark's answer, Borimov sent someone to inform the left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei after hearing the reply of the minister, who sent the right Prime Minister back. He said that the mercenaries should not launch any attacks in a short period of time, but he had to prepare faster. It would be best if they could win a big battle in Suing City first. It would boost the morale of the people and at the same time, give them more initiative in the following negotiations. Ding Dingwei, who received the king's order, did not dare to be negligent. He immediately ordered General Hun Sun, one of the generals, to lead 50,000 troops to Suing City as the vanguard. There were still 50,000 troops from various places waiting there. When the 100,000 troops were in front of the road, perhaps there would be good news. Ding Dingwei wanted to tell the mercenaries that this time, the Gold Edge dynasty was ready for a decisive battle. If they must fight, then they would accompany them to the end. It was still unknown who would win and who would lose. At that time, the mercenaries would be deeply involved. At that time, if the Siam Kingdom and the Awa Kingdom took the opportunity to make trouble in the rear of Laos, it would not be easy for the mercenaries to retreat safely. Ding Dingwei had planned everything very well. As long as he had enough time, with the support of His Majesty, he could confront the mercenaries. The outcome would be full of suspense. Once he defeated the mercenaries, his reputation would be unparalleled. In the future, history would have a fair evaluation of him, and it was even possible that it would be full of praise. Chapter 923. However, all of this changed with the arrival of a piece of news on the next day. At dusk on the second day, a piece of news that no one in Goldenrim City expected was heard. Just this morning, the mercenaries' ships suddenly fired cannons at the southern port of the Goldenrim dynasty. Under the bombardment, the defenses of the port were completely destroyed. Half an hour later, the mercenaries began to disembark and occupied the entire port. The Goldenrim dynasty's navy general, Bamboo, was killed in battle. Now the army was spreading towards the southern White Horse region. In other words, after Suing City in the north, the war in the south had also begun, and it was sweeping over at a very fast speed. Ever since the first request for help was received at dusk, there would be another request for help every half an hour. The south was in danger. At this time, they finally understood the reason for the 2-day deadline. But didn't he greet Skylark before, and the other party also gave him an answer? Minister Ding Dingwei was urgently summoned to the palace. He looked at King Boromir and asked with a puzzled expression, "Your Majesty, when you sent someone to ask Skylark, what did he say?" "He said he knew." "Doesn't that mean he admitted it?" Boromir was puzzled. "Ah, Your Majesty, we were fooled by them. He only said he knew. He didn't say they would stop attacking." Ding Dingwei's expression changed after thinking for a while. "What? He dared to lie to me? Does he want to die?" Boromir gnashed his teeth in anger. He clenched his fists tightly, but he still didn't make up his mind to kill Skylark. There was no other way. The mercenaries had the upper hand in the current situation. He couldn't act rashly. "Your Majesty, the only thing we can do now is not to blame anyone. The war in the south will soon spread to the royal city. We have to find a way to stop them. Why don't we open the treasury and recruit new soldiers?" Ding Dingwei once again wanted to open the treasury. Boromir wanted to nod at this moment, but he thought that there was still a way. He shook his head and said, "We have to recruit new soldiers, but I'm afraid it's too late. Isn't there still 150,000 soldiers in the royal city that haven't arrived in the north? Why don't we mobilize 100,000 soldiers to reinforce the southern front first, and then we can recruit more soldiers?" At this time, Boromov still did not want to use his capital. Tintinwai wanted to persuade him again, but considering the urgency of the military situation, he could only nod and say, "Yes, then we will do as your Majesty wishes." The northern front did not have enough soldiers to begin with, and the situation forced them to send another 100,000 soldiers to the southern front. For a short period of time, the northern front would not have any reinforcements. However, General Hun's son, who was leading 50,000 troops to Suing City, didn't know about this. At this moment, he was still fantasizing about whether he could make the first contribution. There were already reports that the main force of the mercenaries this time was only around 15,000 people. The moment he received the news, Hun's son was even wondering if the news was true. Based on the previous battle results, they had already lost 100,000 soldiers. If that was the case, then what were the 100,000 people doing? He was actually beaten by more than 10,000 people to the point where he couldn't even fight back? No matter what, this time we have to turn defeat into victory. We have to make the first contribution. How about this? Order the army to speed up. Don't let the mercenaries deal a heavy blow to our army. If that happens, we won't have any advantage in numbers. Hun's son looked at the map in his hand, and then looked at the speed of the army with an anxious expression. It was only a distance of 300 li, and the army had already traveled for 2 days. They hadn't even covered half of the distance. Although he was leading infantrymen, the speed was too slow. After the general gave the order, the 50,000 soldiers sped up and rushed towards Suing City. At this moment, after 7 days of chaos, Suing City finally calmed down. This was because Yang Chendong's strategy was good, using civilians to fight civilians. This was something that no one had ever done before, and no one had ever thought of it. But it worked in his hands. When the civilians of Ding City, Jiba City, Jiging City, and Chuamong City came to Suing City to help the mercenaries with transportation, Yang Chendong gave an order to the more than 100,000 civilians who followed them. He asked them to persuade the people in the center of Suing City that as long as they surrendered, their lives would no longer be in danger. Not only that, if they were willing to work for the mercenaries, such as transporting spoils and supplies, carrying the wounded, persuading people to surrender, cleaning up the battlefield, burying the bodies of the dead soldiers, and so on, they would be paid silver. No one would feel bad about money, especially the civilians who followed the mercenaries at the beginning. They found that as long as they were obedient, the mercenaries would never beat or scold them. They would even nod when they met to show their friendliness. This was a treatment and respect that the Gilded Dynasty's army didn't give them. But now the mercenaries gave them this treatment. Because of this, they could be respected and treated as human beings. Plus the considerable amount of silver, everyone's heart began to lean towards the mercenaries. The civilians were originally simple. They were the people who knew what was good and bad. As long as someone was good to them, they would be good to them in return. On the contrary, even if they were of the same race, if they were oppressed, they would also stand up and resist. More than 100,000 civilians received benefits from the mercenaries, and after they entered Suing City, their role was fully played. Since they were all civilians, they had more in common. Under their word of mouth, many civilians were persuaded, some troublemakers were arrested, and the public security in the city was improved. The auxiliary soldiers also solved the problem of feeding the civilians by opening the granaries and other methods. Whether it was public security or order in Suing City, it was restored to the right track. From the moment the civilians entered the city, the chaos in the city was restored to order in just 2 days. Looking at this result, many people admired Yang Chendong even more. Beta Persei also flattered him more than once. Young master, I admire you when it comes to fighting, but Beta Persei admires you even more when it comes to governing. It seems that there is nothing in the world that can stop you. You are really the reincarnation of an immortal. You are really. Okay. One would vomit after listening to too much flattery. Although Beta Persei was speaking from the bottom of his heart, Yang Chendong still interrupted him and asked, "The 1st Cavalry Division and the 4th Division of the Cold Front have rested enough, right? They have rested for a long time. These days, they didn't have to worry about the things in the city. They were just resting. Haha, young master, Division Commander Tian and Division Commander Ling have come to you several times and asked to fight." Beta Persei chuckled. "Then young master, I will give them a chance now. Tell them that there are 50,000 enemies outside the city. How to deal with them will be up to the 2 division commanders. This young master will not participate. Yang Chendong nodded. Previously, they had conquered several cities and defeated more than 100,000 enemies. It was easy to say, but in fact it was just a matter of speed against speed. So many soldiers didn't get a good rest. Taking advantage of the chaos in Suing City, he gave the two divisions enough time to rest. Now that the blade was almost sharpened, it was time to unsheath it. After Yang Chendong gave the order, the 4th Division of the Cold Front and the 1st Cavalry Division left the city after dinner. It was obvious that they were going to launch a night attack again. Due to a lack of nutrition, the ancient armies often suffered from night blindness. This caused them to be at a disadvantage when marching or fighting at night. However, the mercenaries were different. Their nutrition was always balanced. With Crimson City as their base, they didn't lack money. Not only did they not suffer from night blindness, but because of their frequent night training, they were extremely proficient in night battles. So that night, the two divisions, which added up to less than 15,000 people, launched a fierce counterattack against the Golden Edge Army stationed 10 miles in front of Suing City. When the sound of guns and cannons rang out, the 50,000 unprepared Golden Edge Army was hit hard. Although they had sent out night guards, in front of the fierce attack of the two elite divisions, they could not withstand a single blow. The 50,000 soldiers were defeated separately. When the next day dawned, the ground was full of their corpses, as well as all kinds of weapons and provisions thrown everywhere. It was time to use the common people again. With the addition of the 300,000 people in Suing City, more than 400,000 people rushed out, and the battlefield was quickly cleaned up. Those who were slow even left the city empty-handed and returned empty-handed. This was the power of the common people. As long as they were serious and willing to work hard, there was nothing they couldn't do. 50,000 enemies were either killed or captured within a short period of time, and only about 5,000 managed to escape. 90% of them were chased down by the two main divisions early in the morning. In the end, less than 500 of them managed to escape. It was these people who escaped that bumped into General Hun Sen's army that was rushing to Suing City. And then the news of the front line's defeat spread. The originally valiant and high-spirited Golden Edge Army's morale was suddenly hit hard. The army had no choice but to stop 100 miles away from Suing City. In the main tent, Hun Sen was interrogating the deserters, and then his roar came from the main tent. What? You're saying that 50,000 soldiers were wiped out in one night? And they chased you all the way without any intention of stopping? But the news said that the other side only had about 15,000 people. How did they do it? And don't they need to clean up the battlefield? Now that the weather is warm, with so many corpses left outside, there will be a plague. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.